Before being summoned to another world, a group of students suddenly finds themselves gathered inside a grand hall. Confusion spreads among them as they try to understand what has happened. One of the girls recalls that only a moment ago, they had all been on their way to school. Without any warning, everything around them changed, and they were transported to this unfamiliar place. As the bewildered students look around, a king begins addressing them. He explains that for the past several years, the human nation has been engaged in a bitter war against the demonic nations. The conflict has resulted in devastating casualties, enormous financial losses, and crushing debt. According to him, the kingdom now stands on the brink of a severe crisis. Because of this desperate situation, the royal court has decided to summon individuals from other worlds who possess extraordinary powers. Those individuals are the very people standing before him now. The king proudly declares that they have successfully answered the summons of King Geniuses the 18th and announces that they are the legendary heroes destined to save the kingdom. His declaration leaves the newly summoned students even more confused, as they struggle to determine whether any of this could possibly be real. Soon afterward, one of the kingdom's officials steps forward and explains that their abilities will be measured immediately. The examination begins with one of the girls. Upon inspecting her status, the evaluators become visibly surprised. They announce that she possesses the goddess skill, an exceptionally rare ability. Their astonishment grows as another student is found to have a rare skill as well, followed by two more individuals who are also revealed to possess remarkable talents. Meanwhile, one of the girls quietly wonders what exactly a skill is. Standing nearby, a magician explains that skills are special powers granted to those who arrive in this world. They are blessings bestowed by the gods themselves. Hearing this, the king enthusiastically proclaims that skills do not naturally manifest among the people of their world. Their appearance is considered a divine favor, reserved for those summoned from other realms. Because of these God-given abilities, such individuals are revered throughout the kingdom as heroes. The summoned students begin to wonder whether that could truly be the case. If these powers are real, perhaps they really have become heroes. However, one particular girl remains skeptical. The magician addresses her respectfully as Lady Momoko and explains that she is especially gifted. The goddess skill she possesses is an immensely powerful ability, capable of annihilating even high-ranking demons with a single strike. He goes on to praise the talents of the other summoned individuals as well, remarking that this summoning has proven to be an exceptionally worthwhile success. Then the atmosphere suddenly changes. The examiners discover that one of the summoned young men possesses no skill whatsoever. An uncomfortable silence fills the hall. Everyone's attention turns toward him as he stands there in confusion. While the others have been blessed with extraordinary powers, he appears to have received nothing at all. The young man can only wonder whether he truly lacks any ability. The story then shifts to his previous life. He reflects on yet another day wasted as a corporate drone, trapped in the repetitive cycle of work and exhaustion. As always, he finds himself heading to work and attempting to board a train that is already packed beyond capacity. It is not as though he wants to squeeze himself into the crowded carriage, but he has little choice if he intends to make it to work on time. As he prepares to force his way onto the train, he suddenly notices a person standing directly in front of him. In the very next instant, everything around him changes. The crowded station vanishes completely, replaced by a strange and unfamiliar space. Standing before him is the mysterious man he had just noticed moments earlier. The man calmly introduces himself as a god. This revelation immediately causes the young man to wonder whether he has died. The situation is so bizarre that he struggles to come up with any other explanation. The god then explains that the young man is about to be summoned to another world. Furthermore, the god reveals an even stranger detail. His own father is the one who personally selected him for this summoning. The protagonist is left thoroughly confused by this statement. The god continues his explanation, revealing that the protagonist's father is none other than the king of the gods. Until now, the administration of hero summonings had been overseen by Athena. However, many gods had begun voicing complaints, claiming that Athena showed favoritism toward women and was unfairly discriminating against men. As a result, a decision was made for someone else to take charge this time, and that responsibility had fallen to Hephaestus. Hearing all of this only leaves the protagonist even more bewildered. The concept of a summoning administrator is already difficult enough to understand, yet now he is being told that divine politics are involved as well. Hephaestus then introduces himself properly. He explains that he is the god of craftsmanship and creation, a deity renowned for making extraordinary things. Because of this, he personally took charge of creating the skill that would be bestowed upon the protagonist. The god proudly explains that this is the very first time he has ever created a skill for someone. Since it was his first attempt, he devoted all of his effort and passion to its creation, ensuring that it would be something truly special. The protagonist cannot help but feel uneasy after hearing that. Even if the god claims to have done his best, he is not entirely convinced that receiving such a skill is necessarily a good thing. Ignoring his concerns, Hephaestus presents the completed ability. The skill he has crafted is called Master of Supremacy. The god admits that the skill may prove difficult to use. Nevertheless, he expresses confidence that if anyone can figure it out, it will be the protagonist himself. Rather than reassuring him, this statement only makes the protagonist even more worried. Learning that his supposedly special skill is difficult to use does not sound particularly encouraging. Hephaestus continues explaining that Master of Supremacy is a skill into which he poured his entire heart and soul. Before sending the protagonist away, he strongly advises him to make consistent use of the ability once he arrives in the new world. The scene then returns to the present. Standing in the royal hall, the protagonist vaguely recalls that strange encounter before his summoning. As fragments of the memory resurface in his mind, he begins to wonder whether it truly happened or whether it was merely some bizarre dream. While he is lost in thought, the magicians responsible for evaluating the summoned heroes begin whispering among themselves. They appear deeply troubled. They quietly discuss the unprecedented situation before them. Never before has a summoned hero arrived without a visible skill. As far as they know, there is no precedent for such a thing. Observing their reactions, the protagonist realizes that they genuinely seem at a loss for what to do. Since he clearly lacks the powers expected of a hero, he decides that he should probably say something. However, before he can speak, the king suddenly interrupts. The king laments the situation, declaring that he does not know whether he should cry or scream. The kingdom had summoned heroes in hopes of salvation, yet one of them appears completely useless. He then reveals another piece of shocking information. The summoned individuals will not be able to return to their original world. The protagonist immediately points out that he never said anything about returning home in the first place. His response causes Momoko and the other summoned students to become alarmed. They quickly realize the implication of the king's words. If returning home is impossible, then they have effectively been stranded in this world forever. The king confirms their fears. Although the kingdom possesses the means to summon heroes from other worlds, they have absolutely no method of sending them back. This revelation sends waves of panic and frustration through the group of summoned students. The king explains that according to ancient records, only the ruler of the demons, the demon king, possesses knowledge of how to return people to other worlds. That is precisely why the heroes must fight. They are expected to march to the front lines, battle the demonic armies, and ultimately defeat the demon king. Only then might they find a way home. The protagonist calmly states that such expectations have nothing to do with him. Since he possesses no skill whatsoever, he has no ability to fight demons or participate in wars. This answer only worsens the king's frustration. However, the king reveals that the kingdom has already made preparations regarding his situation. At that moment, the protagonist proposes an alternative. If the kingdom has no use for him as a hero, then perhaps they could simply provide him with a piece of land. It does not matter if the land is far away from civilization. He would be perfectly content to cultivate the soil and spend the rest of his days living quietly in solitude. After all, he no longer has a home to return to. His old life consisted of endless work as a corporate employee, trapped in a cycle that offered little happiness. Since he has been given a second chance in another world, he decides that he wants to leave that life behind. Instead of fighting demons, he intends to live peacefully and enjoy his new beginning. The scene then shifts once more. A man guides him to a vast wilderness that stretches as far as the eye can see. The guide informs him that everything beyond this point belongs to him. The land was purchased by His Highness specifically for his use. In addition, he has been granted a stipend, allowing him to live however he wishes. Looking across the endless expanse of untamed territory, the protagonist realizes just how isolated his new home truly is. He remarks that receiving a title and ownership of unexplored land must mean that this area does not officially belong to the kingdom. The guide casually confirms his suspicion. According to the man, there is actually something appealing about such an arrangement. While it is true that the territory beyond this point lies outside the kingdom's borders, that also means the land has no direct connection to the kingdom itself. As a result, whatever the protagonist chooses to do there is entirely his own business. Whether he farms, harvests crops, builds a home, or develops the land however he wishes, the kingdom will not demand taxes or interfere in his affairs. After explaining all of this, the guide casually requests payment for his services, referring to it as a guide fee. Once that matter is settled, the man prepares to leave. Before departing, he explains that humanity will no longer ask anything of him. From this moment onward, he is completely free to do as he pleases. Whether he survives or dies, the kingdom will have no further involvement with his life. The guide admits that the situation makes him feel somewhat guilty. After all, the kingdom effectively cast the protagonist aside because he lacked an ability. Even so, there is nothing more he can do. With a final farewell, the guide turns and leaves. His new life begins there. Normally, a summoned hero would set out on a grand adventure, gathering companions, overcoming countless crises, and eventually defeating a great enemy. However, he can do without all of that. The king and his people seem rather desperate anyway, and he has no intention of getting dragged into whatever disaster is looming over their kingdom. Instead, he plans to live peacefully and safely in this new world. He would rather not have those desperate people imposing their expectations on him. Therefore, he decides to settle somewhere far beyond their reach. Looking around, he concludes that there is no better place than this. With that thought in mind, he boldly declares that he will stay here and make this place his very own little kingdom. To accomplish that, however, he first needs to secure a source of water. From its appearance, a large body of water nearby seems to be seawater. He decides to investigate it, but the moment he takes a drink, he is completely shocked. The water is perfectly drinkable. He wonders whether it might actually be a freshwater lake. Just then, he notices something moving in the shallow water. At first, it looks like an octopus. Then again, he doubts that octopuses normally live in such shallow waters. Regardless, he decides that whatever it is, it will become food one way or another. As he attempts to catch it, he loses his footing and falls into the water. The octopus-like creature lands right on top of him. The instant he falls into the lake, he is greeted by an overwhelming salty taste. So it really is seawater after all. The contradiction leaves him utterly confused. The water had tasted sweet only moments ago. To confirm his suspicions, he scoops up another handful and drinks again. It is sweet once more. At that moment, understanding dawns upon him. This, he decides, is simply what another world feels like. In any case, water no longer appears to be a problem. His next priority is food. Since he has neither seasonings nor proper ingredients, he decides to make do with some octopus boiled in salt water. Afterward comes an even greater challenge, creating his first fire. He recalls the method he learned long ago. First, he must carve a hole into a dry wooden plank. Then he needs to cut a notch beside it, insert a stick into the hole, and rotate it rapidly by hand. The embers created through friction can then be transferred onto dry leaves to ignite a flame. It sounds simple enough in theory. In practice, however, it is much easier said than done. Fired up with determination, he throws himself into the task with all his strength. He spins the stick relentlessly, refusing to give up. Eventually, a small ember appears. Soon afterward, a flame bursts to life. The fire ignites far more easily than he expected. Not only that, but he somehow manages to craft a wooden bowl and even a pair of chopsticks. He cannot help but marvel at how incredible his survival skills seem to be. The thought causes him to pause. Survival skills. Could that be related to his special ability? He remembers the god explaining that the skill bestowed upon him is called Master of Supremacy. Curious, he decides to test it. For now, he begins by clearing some land. Holding a farming tool, he swings it once. A single swing is enough to eradicate every wild plant in the area. His eyes widen in disbelief. What exactly is this? The grass is cut cleanly all the way down to the stem. It feels less like he is cutting vegetation and more like he is extinguishing its very existence. Wanting further confirmation, he moves on to plowing. The soil parts effortlessly beneath his tool. In fact, the earth turns over so smoothly that it barely feels as though he is doing any work at all. The area becomes remarkably large because he unconsciously imagines what an ideal field should look like. Now he is certain. The skill granted by the god truly is extraordinary. Master of Supremacy takes the efficiency of whatever he is holding and multiplies it to an absurd degree. With a power like this, starting a farm will be incredibly easy. Without wasting any time, he gets to work. Using the seeds he acquired back in town, he plants an entire field. Once everything is finished, he looks over his work with satisfaction. Truthfully, he has no idea what kind of crops he has planted. Still, as long as they can be harvested and eaten, he will not have to worry about food supplies. Of course, it will take some time before the crops are ready. Until then, he decides to catch some fish for dinner. This peaceful lifestyle is vastly different from the exhausting corporate life he escaped from. Yet thanks to that experience, he feels confident that he can manage things just fine. Once again, he silently offers his gratitude to the god for granting him such a wonderful skill. Perhaps someday when he successfully grows rice, he will offer a few rice balls as a sacrifice. As he entertains that thought, the fishing rod suddenly jerks violently. His eyes light up. A fish must have taken the bait. However, what emerges from the water is not a fish at all. Instead, he finds himself staring at a girl. Startled beyond belief, he shouts internally in confusion, wondering whether he has somehow managed to fish up an actual person. Then he notices something. The lower half of her body is not human. A beautiful tail extends beneath the surface. Realization immediately strikes him. As expected of another world, mermaids exist here as well. The girl glares at him furiously, accusing him of having the audacity to fish her out of the water like that. Seeing her hostility, he quickly concludes that reasoning with her is probably going to be difficult. Then, to his absolute shock, the mermaid declares that since he is the one who fished her out, he is now obligated to marry her. While he is still trying to process those words, he suddenly notices something strange. The distance between them has somehow dropped to 0. And just like that, before he can even understand what is happening, he finds himself with a mermaid wife in another world. The mermaid looks at him with obvious disdain and declares that she never imagined she would be caught by someone like him. According to her, the moment she was hauled out of the water, she became tainted. Because of that, she can no longer return to the ocean, as if nothing happened. The protagonist attempts to reason with her, trying to explain that being caught by someone does not automatically mean. Before he can even finish his thought, she cuts him off sharply. She insists that he stop spouting nonsense. From the very beginning, the merfolk race has always looked down upon humans. To be caught by a member of a lesser race like him has utterly destroyed her pride. There is no way she could lower her head and return to the ocean after suffering such humiliation. That is why, in her mind, there is only one option left. She has no choice but to become his spouse. As her husband, he must now take responsibility for her and provide for her. The protagonist hurriedly asks her to wait a second. As far as he knows, interspecies relationships are usually full of complications. Perhaps she should think this through a little more carefully before making such a life-changing decision. The mermaid immediately agrees with one point. With her current tail, the two of them would not even be able to mate. Hearing that, the protagonist nearly chokes. That is absolutely not what he meant. However, before he can correct the misunderstanding, the mermaid pulls out a small vial. Without the slightest hesitation, she raises it to her lips and downs its contents in a single gulp. The transformation happens almost instantly. Her fishtail disappears and is replaced by a pair of perfectly human legs. The mermaid proudly announces that she can now live on land without any problems. Furthermore, she is fully capable of bearing his children. Therefore, in her opinion, he has absolutely no reason to complain. The poor protagonist can only stare in stunned disbelief. After several moments of struggling to process everything, he finally gives up. Fine, he understands. But before anything else, she needs to put on some pants. Right now. In the heat of the moment, he somehow ends up accepting her as his wife. Unfortunately, there is one major problem. He possesses absolutely nothing. The only thing he owns is the field he plowed earlier. Meanwhile, the mermaid continues making a fuss about the trousers, apparently unable to understand why he is so obsessed with them. Finally losing his patience, the protagonist loudly declares that he refuses to marry her unless she puts on some pants. He promises that he will get her whatever clothes she likes once he is capable of doing so. For now, however, clothing is not their biggest concern. What matters is the fact that they currently do not even have a roof over their heads. After all, he only arrived here himself not too long ago. Other than the field he prepared, he has absolutely nothing. Just then, something catches his attention. The crops in the field are already beginning to sprout. His eyes widen in surprise. The growth is far too fast to be natural. At that moment, he finally gains a deeper understanding of the gift bestowed upon him by the god, Master of Supremacy. The ability does not merely improve his efficiency, it enhances the capabilities of whatever tool he is holding, pushing its performance beyond normal limits. The mermaid curiously asks what exactly he is growing. The protagonist honestly admits that he has no idea. He planted a variety of seeds without knowing much about them. He does not know whether they will bloom, produce crops, or even be edible. Still, he has a clear goal. He wants to become self-sufficient. Food, housing, tools, everything they need, they will create with their own hands and use for themselves. It will be a humble and peaceful lifestyle. The mermaid listens carefully before suddenly remarking that such a way of life sounds rather troublesome. The protagonist assumes that it must be very different from the lifestyle of merfolk. However, the mermaid quickly shakes her head. If that is the kind of life her husband desires, then she understands completely. She confidently tells him to leave everything to her. Medicine and magic are ancestral arts passed down through her species. In fact, she is considered a rather famous magic user among her people. The protagonist blinks in confusion. He has absolutely no idea what she means by that. The mermaid simply asks whether he would like to see. Her tone suddenly becomes oddly theatrical, causing him to wonder why she is speaking with such a strange accent all of a sudden. Before he can ask any further questions, she abruptly drops her trousers again. The protagonist's expression freezes. Then, without another word, she dashes toward the sea at full speed. Alarmed, he immediately shouts after her, demanding to know where she is going. The mermaid cheerfully replies that she is simply going home to collect her belongings, and then she disappears into the ocean. Left behind on the shore, the poor protagonist can only stand there in stunned silence. He honestly has no idea what just happened. Is that mermaid truly serious about becoming his wife? The entire situation feels so absurd that he can barely believe it. Still, there is no guarantee that she will actually come back. For now, rather than worrying about impossible things, he decides to focus on something far more important. His peaceful new life is only beginning, and the first step toward that life is building himself a simple house. Unable to believe that he manages to create all of this in just a single hour, Caden finally heads to his bed. Even though he possesses the gift skill, he finds himself thinking that the abilities it grants are surprisingly exhausting to use. Then again, he knows that his current fatigue is not entirely caused by his work. Much of it comes from worrying about the mermaid. She has not returned at all, and her prolonged absence has left him uneasy. Just as these thoughts continue running through his mind, the mermaid suddenly emerges. The sight immediately causes him to react in embarrassment, once again urging her to put on some clothes. As she begins dressing herself properly, relief appears on his face. He wonders where she has been throughout the entire night, having spent much of that time feeling genuinely concerned about her whereabouts. The mermaid explains that mermaids have no need for land dwellers to worry about them. She further reveals that it simply takes her a considerable amount of time to gather and pack everything she needs. However, when Caden steps outside and sees what she has brought with her, he is completely stunned. The amount of equipment and supplies before him is far beyond anything he expected. The mermaid proceeds to explain that all of these items are tools used for medicinal magic. According to her, when a person combines plants that possess medicinal properties with similar substances while infusing them with magic, they are able to create medicinal magic. Such magic has numerous practical applications due to the wide variety of remedies and solutions that can be produced from it. Since ordinary people are also capable of using many of these products, they are considered extremely valuable. Hearing this, Caden becomes curious about whether such medicine could be useful if he ever becomes ill. The mermaid explains that medicinal compounds can be prepared in a way that suppresses symptoms and assists in treatment. However, she is not finished demonstrating her knowledge. Soon afterward, she takes out a large, plump fish and identifies it as a Bahirian fish. She explains that monsters contain enormous quantities of mana stored within their bodies. Without wasting any time, she begins processing the fish. First, she cuts it apart. Then she boils it, extracts its useful components, allows the materials to dry thoroughly, and finally grinds everything into powder. After completing the lengthy procedure, she presents the finished product. The result is a special fertilizer. The mermaid explains that if this fertilizer is spread across the fields, the crops will grow at a much faster rate than normal. Since she has already gone through the effort of preparing it, she intends to use it immediately. Watching her work, Caden realizes that everything she has been doing is actually for the sake of improving the farm. The following day, both of them discover something astonishing. The entire field has grown dramatically overnight. The sight leaves Caden speechless with amazement. The results are so extraordinary that he finds himself wishing he had installed support stakes the previous day. Approaching the crops, he picks a tomato and takes a bite. The moment he tastes it, excitement overwhelms him. The flavor is incredibly rich and delicious, exceeding all of his expectations. To him, it feels almost miraculous. The mermaid also takes a tomato and bites into it. For a brief moment, she becomes completely silent. Her reaction causes Kaden to wonder whether the taste perhaps does not suit the dietary preferences of mermaids. However, that concern quickly disappears. The mermaid is simply stunned by how delicious it is. She cannot believe that something grown on land can possess such an incredible flavor. She even begins wondering whether all land dwellers regularly eat food of this quality. Before long, she starts harvesting vegetables enthusiastically, wanting to try every single one available. Her excitement grows so rapidly that she wants to use all of the farming tools herself. Kaden explains that vegetables possess many unique characteristics. Some varieties are not meant to be eaten raw and must be cooked before they become suitable for consumption. Unfortunately, the mermaid pays little attention to such explanations. Instead, she becomes increasingly insistent on eating more vegetables. Her enthusiasm resembles that of a child throwing a tantrum after discovering a favorite treat. Seeing no other option, Kaden decides to prepare a proper meal for her. He cooks several vegetables and serves the finished dish. The mermaid immediately tastes it. The moment she does, her expression brightens noticeably. The cooked vegetables are every bit as delicious as the fresh ones, perhaps even more so. Watching her obvious enjoyment causes Kaden to smile. He begins to think that perhaps he can tolerate some of her noisier habits after all. The mermaid then becomes curious about the eating habits of land dwellers. She wonders whether meals like this are common. Kaden reflects on the question and concludes that, in truth, such dishes are usually accompanied by meat. If possible, people also add fermented herbs and various seasonings to enhance the flavor even further. The explanation only increases the mermaid's astonishment. The possibility that food could become even more delicious than it already is seems almost unbelievable to her. Kaden explains that achieving such flavors requires the proper ingredients. Thinking ahead, he decides that producing condiments should become one of his next goals. Miso and soy sauce are among the things he hopes to create. To accomplish that, they will need to cultivate soybeans. Once they manage to obtain some meat, he also plans to grow various herbs. Furthermore, they will require proper kitchen utensils if they want to prepare food efficiently. Even while discussing future plans, Kaden cannot help appreciating how naturally sweet the vegetables already are. The mermaid studies him quietly for a moment. During this pause, she suddenly realizes that she has never asked for his name. She introduces herself as Platy and reflects that they have been spending time together without even knowing each other's names. As Kaden prepares to answer, his real name briefly comes to mind. However, he remembers that he is now living in an entirely different world. Since there is little reason to cling to his previous identity, he decides to use another name instead. Thus, he introduces himself as Kaden. Platy commits the name to memory and resolves not to forget it. And so, with that simple exchange, Kaden's new life in another world truly begins. A life spent alongside a mermaid named Platy. Kaden is a young man who has recently been summoned from another world. Since arriving in this new land, he begins living a peaceful and relaxing life alongside a mermaid who practically forces him into marriage. Although the arrangement is unusual, he gradually becomes accustomed to their daily life together. One morning, Kaden wakes up and immediately notices that Platy is not in bed beside him. It appears that she has risen earlier than usual. As he sits up, a thought crosses his mind. Even though Platy can transform into a human form, she is still fundamentally a mermaid. He cannot help wondering how comfortable sleeping in a bed truly feels for her. He hopes she does not feel as though she is lying on a chopping board every night, simply because he happened to rescue her. The possibility that she has been silently enduring discomfort troubles him. Before he can dwell on the matter any longer, a loud shout suddenly echoes from outside. The voice unmistakably belongs to Platy. Immediately concerned, Kaden rushes out to see what has happened. Upon finding her, he quickly asks what is wrong. Platy points toward the field and explains that there is someone standing there. Hearing this, Kaden lets out a relieved sigh. He realizes what she is referring to almost immediately. The figure in question is not a person at all, but a scarecrow. He explains that it is something he created himself, proudly describing it as his 101st scale scarecrow. He points out the joints that he carefully incorporated into its construction. These joints allow parts of the scarecrow to move slightly. It is also equipped with a wooden sword. According to Kaden, the purpose of the scarecrow is to drive away birds that might otherwise ruin the crops. In short, it serves as a guardian for the field. Unfortunately, Platy completely misunderstands his explanation. From her perspective, it sounds as though the scarecrow is a doll that actively hunts and kills birds using the wooden sword. Realizing how ridiculous that interpretation is, Caden quickly clarifies that the sword was merely a joke on his part. The scarecrow does not actually move around attacking anything. Its purpose is simply to resemble a human presence. Birds will see it standing in the field and assume that someone is nearby, causing them to stay away. However, Platy calmly informs him that the scarecrow is moving. The statement immediately catches Caden off guard. He blurts out a confused response, unable to understand what she means. Platy, equally puzzled, asks whether it is not supposed to move. Caden insists that there is absolutely no way it should be moving. The entire concept behind the scarecrow relies on the fact that it is nothing more than a stationary object. Yet, even as he says this, he starts wondering whether something unexpected might have happened during its creation. After thinking for a moment, he recalls that he may have accidentally infused it with some of his power while building it. Platy asks whether there is something unusual about him. In response, Caden finally explains the truth. He reveals that he was summoned into this world by the king of the country. He is not originally from this land, but from an entirely different world. When he was brought here, a god granted him special powers. Looking back now, he suspects that one of those powers may have unconsciously manifested while he was constructing the scarecrow. Platy listens carefully before telling him to wait a moment. The revelation raises an important question in her mind. She wonders whether he is actually a hero. Caden becomes curious about her reaction and asks whether she knows anything about such matters. Platy explains that the summoning of heroes from other worlds is one of humanity's most famous magical rituals. Throughout history, heroes brought from distant worlds are usually granted extraordinary powers and tasked with fighting against demonkind. Because of that, she finds the current situation extremely strange. If Caden truly is a hero, then what is he doing here living peacefully on a farm instead of fighting demons? Caden admits that he never liked that part of the arrangement. Rather than participating in a grand war, he chose to retire from those expectations and settle in this quiet place. The answer surprises Platy. As she reflects on it, she concludes that land dwellers are quite fascinating creatures. Humans in particular tend to survive by staying together in groups. Their societies are built around cooperation, protection, and collective strength. In a world filled with dangerous monsters, a lone human would normally struggle to survive for very long. From her perspective, the fact that a summoned hero has abandoned that path entirely and chosen to live peacefully in the countryside is a rather interesting decision. Humans, especially, cannot truly survive if they do not stick together. If they become isolated, monsters can easily kill them without delay. Platy wonders whether Caden might be different from others, but he responds that he believes he belongs to the same race as she does. Shifting the subject, he begins thinking about what they should have for breakfast. As breakfast comes to mind, Caden remembers something and asks Platy about her unusually early awakening that day. He wonders whether she is feeling all right. At the same time, he recalls another concern and asks where she had gone so early in the morning. The question immediately flusters her. Embarrassed, she raises her voice and demands to know where he relieved himself. Caden answers without hesitation, explaining that he did it in the ocean. Observing her shocked reaction, he becomes confused and wonders whether he was not supposed to do that. His confusion only causes Platy to become even more agitated. To her, the answer is painfully obvious. Caden quickly attempts to justify himself by explaining that he has heard of sailors relieving themselves at sea. According to what he knows, plankton consumes such waste. Those plankton are then eaten by other creatures, and the process becomes part of the food chain. Platy responds with a sharp glare. She insists that things do not work that way, and criticizes the insensitive attitude often displayed by land dwellers. According to her, the ocean's food cycle is maintained entirely by its own inhabitants, and there is no need for outsiders to impose their dirty customs upon it. Realizing his mistake, Caden immediately apologizes. However, Platy dismisses the matter by remarking that ocean inhabitants are not as sophisticated as humans claim to be, so perhaps such misunderstandings are unavoidable. After saying that, she suddenly rushes away, telling him to remain where he is for a moment. Left alone, Caden sits quietly and reflects on the situation. Having become accustomed to the convenience of modern bathrooms in his previous world, he realizes that he has forgotten a basic survival practice: digging a hole and covering it afterward. Although this harsh lifestyle is something he once wished for, he cannot help thinking that humans are remarkably weak when confronted by nature. At the same time, a part of him feels relieved that Platy is beside him. Even so, he begins wondering how she truly feels about living in such circumstances with him, and whether she is genuinely content. Before long, Platy returns carrying something unusual. Caden looks at the object with curiosity and asks what it is. She explains that it is a starfish-shaped monster. These proud starfish spend their lives underwater, quietly observing the organic matter around them. Because of this behavior, they are known as the cleaners of the ocean. She further explains that if one of these creatures is placed inside a container, such as a box, it effectively functions as a toilet. Still puzzled, Kaden watches as she announces that she will demonstrate. Without hesitation, Platy cuts her own arm and allows several drops of blood to fall into the container. The blood immediately dissolves and vanishes. She points out that this is the effect the creature possesses. However, Kaden barely notices the demonstration itself. The moment he sees blood flowing from her arm, he rushes forward and grabs her hand. Panic fills his expression as he wonders what he should do about the injury. The sight of so much blood deeply unsettles him. He cannot help thinking that if he had never caught her that day, none of this would have happened. Ever since their first meeting, she has always been the one helping him. Platy immediately pushes him away. She criticizes him for being foolish and activates a healing spell. Within moments, the wound disappears completely. She points out that she is perfectly fine and remarks that humans are far too easily frightened. Feeling embarrassed, Kaden admits that he is indeed scared, overly considerate, and perhaps even troublesome. He apologizes once again. He then explains that the reason he rescued her in the first place was related to the power he had received. Because of that, he believes she should return to the ocean where she truly belongs. Platy rejects the idea entirely. She explains that she has grown fond of him, and that this is precisely why she intends to continue supporting him from now on as his bride. Referring to him affectionately as her dear, she asks whether he has anything he wishes to say in response. A blush spreads across Kaden's face. Despite her direct words, he can only answer that he has nothing to say. Afterward, a gentle smile appears on his face. He thanks her sincerely and reflects that their life has gradually become easier and more comfortable. Nevertheless, there is still breakfast to prepare. Platy agrees, and the two continue with their morning. Meanwhile, the scene shifts elsewhere. A monster hears an unfamiliar noise echoing nearby and becomes curious about its source. Sensing that something strange is happening in the vicinity, it begins moving closer to investigate the disturbance. The following day, Platy approaches Kaden and excitedly tells him to take a look at what she has made. She reveals that she has transformed the wrapping clothes she had stored in her luggage into a new outfit. Kaden looks at her and hesitates. He remarks that he is not important enough for her to go through so much effort. Platy quickly reassures him. In her view, there is absolutely nothing wrong with a wife wanting to make herself presentable for her husband's sake. Besides, she points out that this is her first time going out in quite a while. She then reveals that she has discovered a dungeon. The word immediately catches Kaden's attention. To him, a dungeon is a place where adventurers venture underground in search of treasure, battling monsters along the way until they eventually reach a powerful boss waiting on the deepest floor. Even so, he cannot help wondering whether such a place is truly safe. Platy assures him that seeing it in person will be far easier than trying to explain it with words alone. Not long afterward, the two of them arrive at the dungeon. Kaden looks around in surprise and realizes that the location is nearly 2 hours away from their home. He wonders when she even managed to discover this cave. Platy explains that she found it while he was busy working in the fields. She goes on to explain that this particular dungeon is a cave-type dungeon. Dungeons naturally appear in locations where mana is especially abundant. From the outside, such places look no different from ordinary caves. As Kaden examines the surroundings, however, he begins noticing something unusual. A strange sensation brushes against him. It feels as though a large animal is licking his face, yet there is nothing visible before him. Watching his reaction, Platy remarks that the expressions of otherworlders are always fascinating. She then begins explaining the nature of dungeons. According to her, the energy that normally flows and circulates throughout the world occasionally stops moving in certain locations and begins to stagnate. When that happens, those locations become dungeons. As one travels deeper inside, the concentration of energy grows denser and denser. Eventually, that condensed energy takes physical form and is reborn as monsters. As a consequence, the monsters born within dungeons continue multiplying. If left unchecked, they eventually overflow from the dungeon and begin invading both the land and the ocean. Hearing this explanation, Kaden immediately realizes the seriousness of the situation. The entire process sounds extremely dangerous. Platy confirms that this very problem is the reason they have come here. Kaden asks whether anything can be done to stop it. She explains that completely cleaning out everything inside a dungeon is practically impossible. Therefore, the only realistic solution is to return periodically and eliminate the monsters before their numbers become too great. According to her, that is simply how things must be handled. After finishing her explanation, she prepares to move forward. However, before she can proceed, Caden speaks up. Although he may not be particularly strong, he reminds himself that he is still a husband of sorts. Because of that, he decides that he will accompany her. Together, the two of them finally enter the dungeon. The moment they step inside, Caden notices that the interior is completely different from the cave entrance they saw outside. Instead of a natural cavern, the inside resembles a castle. The sight strikes him as incredibly strange. As they continue deeper, they come across a nest filled with monsters. Immediately, Platy tells Caden to stay back. Taking out several different chemical substances, she throws them toward the creatures. Caden watches in amazement as the monsters are overwhelmed by a variety of effects. Some are engulfed in flames, others become frozen solid. One is struck by lightning, while another begins melting away entirely. Platy casually explains that these are merely simple battle medicines. To her, dealing with creatures of this level is effortless. Once the monsters have been eliminated, she suggests that they continue onward. Meanwhile, Caden remains standing in place, completely bewildered. The entire battle happened so quickly that he could not even distinguish which creatures were monsters and which were not. In the end, he decides that it would be better to leave the fighting to Platy for now. After all, he is still completely clueless when it comes to combat. Until he manages to find a weapon he can actually use against monsters, there is little he can contribute. As that thought crosses his mind, something catches his eye. Lying on the dungeon floor is a sword. The weapon appears strangely out of place amidst the dungeon surroundings. As Caden stares at it, a thought suddenly forms in his mind. Perhaps this is finally his chance to obtain a weapon of his own and actually not use it for its use. Caden calls out to Platy and points out that she has already collected quite a few of the medicinal herbs, suggesting that they should head home. However, Platy immediately refuses. Caden wonders whether she still believes they have not gathered enough herbs. Platy explains that the quantity is not the issue. Instead, she has noticed something unusual about the dungeon. The layout of the dungeon feels strange, and there is also an unsettling sensation that the monsters within are being directed by some unseen force. She admits that it may only be a suspicion, but she believes there could be a master residing within the dungeon. Caden wonders whether she means that there is a boss monster in the dungeon. Platy confirms his assumption and explains that dungeons containing a master are exceptionally rare. Unfortunately, they are also among the most dangerous places one can encounter. Caden asks what exactly she means by that. Platy explains that there are only two species capable of becoming dungeon masters in the first place. She begins to speculate that it could either be a dragon or, before she can finish her explanation, a powerful gust of wind suddenly blows toward them. Caden immediately senses that something is wrong and wonders what this strange feeling could be. Platy reacts at once, recognizing the ominous presence. The ghostly air surrounding them leaves no room for doubt. She realizes that there truly is a dungeon master present, after all. Not only that, but it is the more terrifying of the two possibilities. The creature before them is a lifeless king. The lifeless king is known as the King of the Undead, a powerful and highly intelligent magician or high priest who, during life, willingly transformed himself into an undead being. He is an immortal monarch who reigns over countless undead servants, and encountering him is considered equivalent to encountering death itself. Caden can clearly feel the overwhelming and unnatural mana radiating from the monster. The lifeless king declares his intention to turn Caden into a corpse and welcome him as one of his undead companions. In response, Platy immediately throws medicinal potions at the undead king. However, her efforts prove ineffective. The lifeless king effortlessly restores himself, rendering the attacks useless. Realizing the terrifying truth, Platy concludes that he is truly immortal. She tells Caden that she still has a few potions remaining and urges him to leave everything to her and run away while he still can. Caden refuses without hesitation. There is no way he can abandon her in such a situation. Declaring that he is her husband, he rushes straight toward the lifeless king despite the danger before him. As the battle continues, the lifeless king remarks that although he has already yielded his power and status, the might of the holy sword remains as fearsome as ever. His statement causes Caden to question whether he has truly picked up a holy sword. The lifeless king explains that he thought the weapon seemed familiar. He recognizes it as the sacred sword that once belonged to him. Caden asks whether the sword originally belonged to the lifeless king. The lifeless king denies the notion. He explains that the sword no longer belongs to him. Holy swords possess wills of their own and choose their masters according to their own judgment. The sword before Kaden has already separated itself from its former owner and has chosen Kaden instead. Since the holy sword has abandoned him, the duty he once carried out in this world has also come to an end. Therefore, Kaden should strike him down with that very sword and free even an undead creature such as himself. Kaden responds that this is merely a hunch, but he does not believe that he is truly the rightful owner of the sword. The lifeless king is baffled by this statement and questions how such a thing could possibly be true. Kaden then reveals the truth. He explains that he comes from another world. Before arriving here, he was granted a unique power, the ability to become a master of any tool that he holds in his hands. Kaden explains that his special ability likely reacted with the sword because he had been using it. However, the lifeless king is utterly stunned by the revelation. He begins shouting in disbelief, unable to comprehend what he has just heard. He wonders how such a thing could be possible. According to everything he knows, that power is a divine gift bestowed by the gods themselves, an ability that exists only in ancient legends. It is an extraordinary blessing beyond the reach of ordinary people. The lifeless king reflects on the nature of skills and abilities, believing that there is something absolute and unchangeable within the calculations that govern them. Yet Kaden possesses a power that defies all common understanding. The lifeless king cannot imagine that someone who has received a gift from the gods could merely be an ordinary person who cannot even be called a hero. No, there can only be one explanation. He concludes that Kaden must be a saint. Overcome with awe, the lifeless king drops to his knees and lowers his crown in reverence. He declares that this is a tremendous honor and an overwhelming blessing. He proclaims that this world should offer Kaden the greatest possible hospitality. Meanwhile, Kaden is left feeling awkward and confused. He silently wishes that people would stop making such grand assumptions about him and giving him titles that only complicate matters. Platy, on the other hand, is completely unsurprised by the situation. To her, this reaction is exactly what she expects from someone meeting the husband she personally chose. She proudly observes the scene before turning her attention back to the lifeless king. However, despite all the praise being directed at him, Kaden has another concern. He asks what exactly they should do about the dungeon itself. In response, Kaden explains that he has already settled down in the surrounding area. Since he plans to continue living there, exterminating monsters remains an important responsibility for anyone residing nearby. Platy quickly joins the discussion and expands on his point. She explains that monster fur and bones are valuable materials used in the creation of magical tools. In addition, some monsters, once properly prepared and cooked, are surprisingly delicious. Hearing this explanation causes Kaden to look at dungeons from an entirely different perspective. He cannot help but wonder if the dungeons of this world are essentially giant convenience stores filled with useful resources. Platy happily remarks that dungeons are indeed incredibly convenient, especially when they are located close to one's home. She then walks over to the lifeless king and politely asks whether it would be acceptable for them to come and make use of the dungeon from time to time. The lifeless king readily agrees. In fact, he reveals that he has personally been dealing with some of the excess monsters himself. Since the monster population continuously increases, their assistance would actually be very helpful. This answer pleases Platy greatly. She cheerfully states that she looks forward to becoming neighbors with him. Afterward, she formally introduces both herself and Kaden. Once the introductions are complete, she asks the lifeless king about his own identity. The lifeless king falls into deep thought. When several moments pass without an answer, Platy wonders whether he has forgotten. The lifeless king eventually replies that, if he remembers correctly, he once served as a bishop of a certain church during his previous life. For reasons he can no longer fully recall, he had apparently become the target of pursuit and was forced to flee. During his escape, he descended into this dungeon and encountered its overwhelming concentration of mana. At some point, he placed a powerful curse upon himself and transformed into an undead being. Hundreds of years have passed since then. Over such a vast stretch of time, many of his memories have faded away. He no longer remembers the true reason he chose to become an undead. Even his own name has been lost to history. The lifeless king reflects that he has become little more than an old being who lacks even a reason to continue living. Yet things may finally begin to change. From this day onward, the endless suffering known as boredom may disappear, if only by a small amount. Kaden smiles warmly upon hearing this. He invites the lifeless king to visit their home whenever he wishes. Kaden promises that they will gladly welcome him and even share some of the vegetables they are growing. Caden also mentions to Platy that the lifeless king had once been a high-ranking member of the church during his lifetime. Because of that, he intends to respectfully address him as master from now on. Thus, what began as a dangerous encounter with a terrifying dungeon master ends in an unexpected friendship. In the end, Caden and Platy find themselves with a surprisingly pleasant new neighbor. As an added bonus, they also obtain the holy sword along the way. Caden excitedly announces to Platy that it is finally finished. Curious, Platy asks what he is making this time. With obvious pride, Caden explains that he is forging a smithing tool. He remarks that the holy sword is truly incredible, capable of slicing through massive boulders as easily as if they were warm butter. Platy cannot help questioning what exactly he thinks the holy sword is meant to be used for. She then asks why he is even making smithing tools in the first place. Caden reminds her that he recently received a gift from the lifeless king. Platy immediately realizes that he is referring to the mana metal. The generous skeletal king had given it to him without hesitation. According to common knowledge, enough dense mana had to accumulate within cave dungeons for an incredibly long period before a single piece of mana metal could finally materialize. Such a material was exceptionally rare, and giving away something so valuable so casually seemed almost unbelievable. In Platy's eyes, the lifeless king truly is an extraordinarily kind individual. Wanting to know more, she asks what Caden intends to do with such a precious resource. Caden explains that now that they have finally obtained mana metal, he can create something he has wanted to make for a very long time. Hearing this, Platy naturally assumes that he must be planning to forge a magical sword. Since the material itself is made from concentrated mana, it would undoubtedly be perfect for crafting an exceptional magic weapon. A solid mana metal sword would surely be worth at least 10 gold points, perhaps even more. However, to her complete surprise, Caden presents the finished products. Platy stares blankly at them and asks what they are. Caden calmly informs her that one is called a frying pan, and the other is a kitchen knife. Seeing her confusion, he decides that demonstrating their purpose would be faster than explaining. Picking up the kitchen knife, he begins cutting vegetables with remarkable ease. Afterward, he places them into the frying pan and cooks them. Once they are properly fried, he seasons them with salt and pepper. Before long, a simple plate of fried vegetables is complete. Platy takes a bite. The moment the food touches her tongue, tears begin forming in her eyes. She is overwhelmed by the flavor and cannot comprehend how something so simple can be this delicious. Caden explains that the frying pan and kitchen knife are tools specifically designed to create dishes like the one she is currently eating. Still stunned, Platy asks whether such cooking utensils have always existed. Caden casually replies that he personally made both of them. He then goes on to explain the advantages of mana steel. The material possesses excellent heat conductivity while remaining extremely lightweight. Food does not burn and stick to its surface as easily, making cleanup far simpler. In his opinion, it is an outstanding metal for cooking equipment. With these new tools in hand, Caden feels that the range of dishes he can prepare has expanded considerably. The moment Platy hears that, her eyes widen. She immediately asks whether that means there are even more recipes he wants to add to his cooking repertoire. Caden naturally confirms this. There are plenty of dishes he still wishes to make. The only problem is that he lacks a few necessary ingredients. The instant those words leave his mouth, Platy eagerly demands to know what ingredients he needs. Caden pauses to think for a moment before explaining that vegetables become even more delicious when cooked with oil. The richness and depth of flavor increase dramatically, creating an entirely different culinary experience. Simply imagining such food is enough to fill Platy with excitement. Unable to contain herself any longer, she enthusiastically declares that they are going out immediately to gather whatever ingredients are required. Platy immediately proposes that they head toward the Green Forest stroll. As a mermaid, she has still never had the opportunity to see many mountain-type monsters in person. Ever since arriving on land, she has always wanted to try eating one. Of course, bird-type monsters exist as well, but there are also mountain-type monsters such as square boars, deer, and various other creatures. Among all of them, however, the mountain-type monsters are considered the most suitable for cooking. According to popular belief, their meat is exceptionally delicious. Hearing this, Caden begins thinking about how monsters function in this world. Normally, monsters are utilized for a variety of benefits, but his experience in the cave dungeon serves as an important example. Monsters are born inside dungeons, and the cave dungeon had been carefully controlled by the lifeless king. The skeletal ruler had used his power to prevent the monsters from leaving the dungeon and causing trouble outside. If mountain-type monsters are roaming this area, then that would imply that the mountain itself is a dungeon. Caden finds the idea difficult to believe. Surely there cannot be a dungeon located so close to where they live. However, before he can think further, both of them suddenly notice movement ahead. A group of boars emerges from the forest. Caden freezes in shock. Platy, on the other hand, becomes visibly excited. Watching her reaction, Caden wonders what is wrong with her. The monsters are clearly preparing to attack, yet she seems delighted by the situation. Platy quickly explains that the creatures are square boars. The sight amazes her. Their appearance confirms that there must be at least 2 dungeons nearby. Without wasting any time, she instructs Caden to restrain them as cleanly as possible. She also asks him not to be overly concerned about how they are taken down. Naturally, her intention is to defeat every single one of them. One of the square boars immediately charges toward Caden. Realizing that he has no choice, Caden rushes forward and strikes. Before long, the battle is over. Platy watches with satisfaction and praises the performance as splendid. Caden can only sigh. Since the monsters kept coming, one after another, he ended up defeating far more than he originally expected. Meanwhile, Platy's attention is already focused on the meat. She suggests that they begin preparing it immediately. If Caden cuts the meat into convenient cooking portions, she can use her own magic to freeze it and preserve it for future meals. Caden points out that even if she says that, the quantity is enormous. With this amount of meat, they would need both a refrigerator and a wagon to transport everything. Eventually, that is exactly what happens. Before long, they have constructed a wagon along with a refrigerator specifically for storage. Upon seeing the completed refrigerator, Caden asks whether there is freezing magic incorporated into it as well. Platy stares at him as though the answer should be obvious. Naturally, there is. Caden is genuinely impressed. Thanks to her abilities, their daily lives are becoming increasingly comfortable. Simple conveniences that would normally be impossible are now readily available. Platy, however, has little interest in discussing household improvements. In her opinion, the most important matter is that they can now upgrade their meals. She urges Caden to hurry and begin cooking. Caden starts considering the possibilities. The square boar is still essentially a pig. If he is going to use pork to create the most delicious dish imaginable, there is only one answer: tonkatsu. The image of crispy golden coating wrapped around juicy pork immediately appears in his mind. Just thinking about it makes him desperately want to eat it. Platy sits nearby, staring suspiciously at him. She wonders what kind of absurd fantasy he is imagining this time. Caden continues planning the recipe. Unfortunately, if he wants to make tonkatsu properly, they are once again lacking ingredients. Obtaining bread had already proven troublesome enough. Now, the greatest obstacle is eggs. With that in mind, he asks Platy whether there is a custom in this world of cooking and eating bird eggs. Platy recalls hearing that the land dwellers of this country sometimes do such things. Curious, Caden asks whether that practice does not exist in the Mermaid Kingdom. In response, Platy points toward a crow perched nearby and asks whether he is referring to birds like that. Caden immediately rejects the idea. He does not believe that particular bird would be suitable for cooking. Platy then suggests a simple solution. They should return to the mountains once more. If they search carefully, they may eventually find a bird-type monster that lays edible eggs. Caden reluctantly agrees. Even if they encounter another dangerous monster along the way, they will simply have to deal with it. However, just as the discussion ends, Caden suddenly hears something unusual. A powerful sound echoes through the air. He instinctively turns around. At first, he sees a distant shape moving across the sky. For a brief moment, it almost resembles a bird. Then it seems more like an aircraft, but neither assumption is correct. The enormous figure rapidly grows larger. Only then does Caden realize the truth. It is a dragon. The massive creature descends from the heavens and fixes its gaze upon them. Its voice booms across the landscape as it demands to know whether they are the ones who invaded the dungeon under its rule. Caden immediately wonders whether the dragon is referring to that mountain dungeon. The dragon confirms that it is. Alarmed, Caden turns toward Platy. He reminds her that she specifically said there was no dungeon master governing that place. Platy can only stare back in disbelief. How was she supposed to know? The dragon's attention remains locked entirely upon Caden. Introducing itself, it declares that it shall ask one final time. Who entered Dragon King Mountain without permission? Who slaughtered its subordinates? Who dared trespass upon its domain? If that person is Caden, then he must answer. Caden immediately bows his head. He hurriedly explains that they genuinely did not know the mountain had a master. He apologizes repeatedly and promises that they will never enter the mountain again. Hoping for mercy, he asks whether the dragon could possibly forgive them. The dragon's expression grows colder. In its eyes, forgiveness is impossible. These insignificant life forms invaded its territory and acted however they pleased. They stained the honor of Dragon King Mountain and disgraced its authority. Such crimes cannot be overlooked. Therefore, it declares that their existence shall be erased. Only through their destruction can their sins be cleansed. The dragon opens its jaws. A terrifying concentration of heat gathers within its mouth. Then, with a furious roar, it commands them to die. An immense torrent of dragon fire erupts toward Caden and Platy, engulfing everything in its path. As Platy breaks down in tears, convinced that they are about to die, Caden steps forward and places himself in front of her. With no time to think, he instinctively swings the holy sword and attempts to deflect the raging flames. To his utter astonishment, the impossible happens. The torrent of fire is pushed back and sent hurtling toward the dragon itself. The dragon stares in disbelief. A mere human has not only managed to block his breath of death, but has actually reflected it back at him. Such a feat should have been impossible. While Platy is overwhelmed with relief and amazement at Caden's achievement, the dragon remains frozen in shock. What astonishes him even more is the fact that not a single ember remains. Every trace of the destructive flames has vanished completely. Caden quickly glances back toward his field and breathes a sigh of relief upon seeing that it remains unharmed. The crops are safe, and nothing has been damaged. Turning back toward the dragon, Caden apologizes for entering the dungeon without permission. However, he firmly declares that if the dragon intends to pursue the matter any further, then he will fight in order to protect the things that are precious to him. He addresses the dragon as the master of the dungeon and asks whether he truly intends to engage in a battle to the death. Despite his brave words, Caden desperately hopes in his heart that the dragon will simply back down and leave. At that moment, the dragon's eyes suddenly widen as he notices the holy sword in Caden's hands. A realization flashes through his mind, and he begins to wonder whether that sword truly belongs to him. Seeing the dragon's reaction, Caden quickly gets an idea. He confidently claims that the weapon is indeed the holy sword. He explains that the sword was bestowed upon him by the lifeless king, the undead king himself, who entrusted him with such an extraordinary weapon. The dragon immediately erupts in outrage. According to him, Caden is completely mistaken. The sword does not belong to the lifeless king at all. The dragon insists that the holy sword is actually his. Caden flinches at the dragon's furious declaration. At that exact moment, another figure appears. The lifeless king arrives on the scene and effortlessly avoids one of the dragon's attacks. After doing so, he turns toward Caden and apologizes sincerely, admitting that the situation has become like this because of him. Platy, utterly confused by everything unfolding before her, immediately demands an explanation. The lifeless king proceeds to clarify the misunderstanding. He explains that the dragon had been searching for the individual who entered his mountain. While looking for the culprit, the dragon first arrived at the lifeless king's domain. Upon seeing him there, the dragon angrily demanded to know how he dared enter his territory. The lifeless king had initially assumed that the dragon was referring to his neighbor. However, the moment that particular neighbor was mentioned, the dragon became even more enraged and flew away immediately. That, according to the lifeless king, is how the entire situation escalated. Caden then admits that, regardless of the circumstances, it is still true that they entered the dragon's mountain without permission. From his perspective, they are the ones at fault. The lifeless king acknowledges Caden's point, but explains that he can understand the reasoning behind human actions because he was once human himself. He begins explaining that dungeons are invaluable sources of resources for mankind. The materials found within them are exceptionally useful. Rare ingredients, construction materials, and countless other necessities can be gathered there. Such resources are essential for obtaining the things people need in their daily lives. Because of this, humans regularly form parties and venture into dungeons to challenge them. From the perspective of a dungeon master, intruders are simply an everyday occurrence. That is precisely why the lifeless king believes the dragon's reaction is excessive. In his view, becoming enraged merely because the upper layers of a dungeon were invaded and then personally leaving the dungeon to chase after the intruders is an incredibly reckless and immature action. The lifeless king bluntly criticizes the dragon, stating that such behavior is far too narrow-minded for someone possessing great strength. Furthermore, he He describes the dragon's conduct as childish. He then questions whether the dragon truly believes himself worthy of becoming the successor of the dragon gizzard. The criticism does not stop there. The lifeless king points out that Caden is not even an opponent on the dragon's level. Given that fact, he orders the dragon to return to his mountain immediately. Rather than calming down, the dragon becomes even more furious. He declares that he cannot simply walk away. The issue, according to him, is the holy sword itself. He demands to know why a mere human possesses that weapon. The sword, he explains, is the very blade that his father instructed him to retrieve from the battlefield after his death. The dragon continues shouting, directing his anger toward the lifeless king. He demands an explanation for why such a treasured sword was handed over to Caden. In response, the lifeless king calmly explains that the sword possesses a will of its own. The holy sword chooses its wielder. Furthermore, after taking the life of the dragon's father, the lifeless king came to understand the immense power contained within that weapon. He also came to understand the fear that accompanied such power. Compared to the dragon, who knows only how to indiscriminately burn everything in sight, Caden is a far more suitable wielder for the sword. Therefore, the lifeless king believes it is only natural that the weapon chose him. Hearing this explanation only drives the dragon into a greater rage. He demands to know how anyone could expect him to accept such reasoning. To him, both the lifeless king and Caden are standing in his way. After all, the two of them are competing for the position of successor to the dragon gizzard. The lifeless king calmly states that if the dragon insists on pursuing the matter, then perhaps he should become the dragon's opponent instead. Faced with the prospect of fighting the lifeless king, the dragon realizes that he has little choice. Reluctantly, he decides to withdraw for the time being. Before leaving, he angrily declares that he will remember this day. Just as the dragon prepares to fly away, Caden suddenly asks him to wait for a moment. Without thinking, Caden rushes forward and grabs the dragon's tail. The moment he does so, the enormous dragon loses his balance and crashes to the ground. The dragon immediately erupts in outrage, demanding to know how a mere human has managed to touch his body so casually. Caden quickly apologizes for his actions. However, before the dragon can continue complaining, Caden asks whether he would be willing to stay a little longer if he is not in a hurry. A short while later, Caden presents a freshly prepared meal. He explains that it is a steak made from the square boar he obtained from the dungeon. Since he has never cooked for a dragon before, he admits that he is not entirely sure whether the dish will suit the dragon's tastes. The instant the dragon takes a bite, his entire demeanor changes. His eyes widen in amazement, and he begins devouring the food at an astonishing speed. Unable to contain his surprise, he demands to know what exactly he is eating. The flavor is unlike anything he has ever experienced. Caden is relieved to see that the dragon enjoys the meal. However, his relief does not last long. Both the dragon and Platy immediately begin demanding more servings. As the two continue asking for additional food, Caden starts wondering just how much meat he will have to prepare. Suddenly, Platy notices something strange. The dragon's body begins to glow. A brilliant light surrounds him, sparkling brightly before everyone's eyes. To everyone's astonishment, the dragon's form starts changing. When the light finally fades, the enormous dragon has transformed into a human. More specifically, the dragon has become a young woman. Seeing Caden's surprise, the lifeless king explains that dragons possess a unique ability that allows them to transform into human form whenever they desire. Now in her human appearance, the dragon girl immediately turns toward Caden. She openly admits that she has grown very fond of the steak he prepared. In fact, she boldly declares that she will always love it. Without wasting another second, she orders Caden to bring out more meat immediately. Meanwhile, Caden begins to realize that grilling only a small amount of meat will never be enough to satisfy this dragon. The lifeless king also samples the steak and carefully evaluates it. He concludes the dish is exceptionally delicious. The meat itself is grilled perfectly. But what impresses him most is the seasoning. Caden uses garlic to create a rich aroma before enhancing the flavor with salt and pepper. On the surface, the dish appears simple. Yet, despite its simplicity, it achieves a remarkable level of flavor. The lifeless king believes that calling it a simple dish would actually be inaccurate. In his opinion, not even the chefs of the royal palace could prepare something this delicious. After the meal, everyone is completely full and satisfied. Even so, the dragon girl quickly resumes her usual attitude. She warns Caden not to become too proud of himself. According to her, he should not get carried away simply because he knows how to cook. More importantly, she still has not given up on obtaining the holy sword. Caden apologetically explains that the sword refuses to leave his side. No matter what he does, he cannot simply hand it over. The dragon girl immediately responds that, if that is the case, she could simply burn him into ashes with her fire breath and take the sword afterward. Before Caden can react, Platy cuts into the conversation. She points out that if the dragon actually does that, she will never be able to eat Caden's steaks again. The statement strikes the dragon girl like a bolt of lightning. For a moment, she freezes completely. Then, without hesitation, she transforms back into her dragon form. Looking down at Caden, she loudly declares that he should remember this day. Someday, she will definitely take the holy sword from him. Until that day arrives, however, she intends to visit from time to time so that she can eat more of his delicious meat. Therefore, he had better be prepared. Caden simply smiles at her declaration. He replies that she is welcome to visit whenever she likes. As the dragon prepares to leave, Platy suddenly calls out to her and asks her to wait. Platy explains that she has a question regarding the monsters living inside the dragon's dungeon. Specifically, she wants to know whether there are any bird-type monsters inhabiting the area. The dragon girl casually replies that there are quite a few of them. However, she also mentions that they are mostly bony creatures and do not taste very good. Platy quickly clarifies that she is not interested in eating the monsters themselves. Instead, she wants their eggs. If the monsters lay eggs, then Caden might be able to create dishes that are even more delicious than the steaks they enjoyed today. The moment the dragon hears this, she becomes visibly excited. Without another word, she announces that she is returning to her dungeon immediately. Platy hurriedly asks her to wait. Since the dragon is familiar with the ecology of the monsters living there, Platy wants to accompany her and learn more about them. The dragon agrees, and before long the two of them depart together. As Caden watches them leave, the lifeless king observes the entire scene with amusement. He remarks that the two of them are certainly lively individuals. Caden nods in agreement. They are undeniably energetic and troublesome at times. Nevertheless, he admits that having such lively companions is far better than living a life filled with nothing but boredom. Caden proudly announces to Platy that it is finally finished. The moment she sees what he is holding, she is completely taken aback. Staring at the object in disbelief, she begins to wonder whether it is exactly what she thinks it is. Caden confirms her suspicions. He explains that he decided to try forging a sword using mana metal. Platy immediately recognizes the material. There is no doubt about it. It is genuine mana metal. The realization leaves her speechless. A sword forged entirely from mana metal is no ordinary weapon. In terms of raw quality and power, it could very well become the strongest sword in the world, excluding only the holy sword itself. As she stares at the magnificent blade, Platy naturally assumes that Caden intends to sell it. Such a weapon would be worth an unimaginable fortune. However, Caden casually reveals that he has no intention of selling it. This answer surprises her even more. If he is not planning to sell such a priceless weapon, then what could he possibly be using it for? Caden then reveals the truth. Rather than keeping the sword for himself, he has decided to upgrade the Scarecrow. Since they possess enough mana metal, he believes there is no reason not to improve its equipment. The moment Platy hears this, she is left utterly dumbfounded. She immediately imagines the consequences. With a mana metal sword in its hands, the Scarecrow should now be able to cut down all those annoying birds that constantly target their fields. Just thinking about such a possibility seems to excite the Scarecrow itself. Without wasting any time, it brandishes the mana metal sword and performs a powerful slashing motion. The Scarecrow appears completely ready to test out its new weapon. Seeing this, Caden quickly panics. He immediately shouts at the Scarecrow, reminding it that killing is strictly prohibited. Fortunately, his worries prove unnecessary. Although the Scarecrow enthusiastically swings the sword, it cannot actually reach any of the birds flying overhead. The birds remain completely unharmed. Realizing this, Caden feels a small sense of relief. At least the Scarecrow is incapable of carrying out its violent ambitions. Meanwhile, Platy cannot help but wonder why Caden would give such an extraordinary weapon to a Scarecrow in the first place. To her, the decision makes absolutely no sense. Caden, however, answers with complete sincerity. The reason is simply that it is awesome. Platy finds herself unable to understand his reasoning at all. Once again, she discovers that she does not truly comprehend the strange sense of romance that men seem to possess. While she struggles to make sense of the situation, Caden is already thinking about something entirely different. Now that the Scarecrow has received a mana metal sword, he begins wondering what kind of equipment he should create for it next. The thought alone fills him with excitement as new possibilities start forming in his mind. The scene then cuts, and Caden is seen fishing while thinking that it has been quite a long time since he last went fishing. He recalls the previous time he had gone out to fish. Back then, he had believed that he had caught something enormous, only to discover that what he had actually caught was a mermaid. Before he even realized what was happening, he ended up married because of a single fishing pole. He decides to live together with Platy. As an ordinary salaryman who had suddenly been transported to another world, he originally believed that he would be able to fully enjoy a peaceful and slow life there. However, his life becomes much more fulfilling thanks to the mermaid who practically forces him to become her husband. There is also a neighboring dragon, and because everyday life around the shore is constantly busy and lively, Caden comes fishing in search of a brief moment of peace away from all the commotion. As he enjoys the calm surroundings, he thinks that the place is certainly nice. Suddenly, he hears a loud splashing sound. Looking toward the ocean, he notices someone glaring directly at him from the water. The sight immediately horrifies him. He observes that the figure possesses fins and begins wondering whether this individual might perhaps be acquainted with Platy. The mermaid man continues glaring at Caden with intense hostility. He immediately orders everyone around him to prepare themselves because they are going to kill that man at once. Furthermore, he commands them to eliminate anyone who dares oppose them. Without wasting any time, he launches an attack against Caden. In response, Caden calmly draws his holy sword. With a single slash, he unleashes tremendous power, throwing the entire sea into chaos. After witnessing the result, he begins wondering what exactly he should do next. At that moment, Platy suddenly arrives from behind and questions what is happening there. Upon seeing her, the mermaid man immediately calls out to Platy. In return, Platy identifies him as her brother. The mermaid man then addresses her as princess and asks whether she is safe. Hearing the title of princess, Caden turns toward Platy in surprise. Platy then explains that she will properly introduce everyone. She reveals that the man before them is her older brother, Prince Arowana, who is also the next heir to the throne. Upon hearing this, Caden realizes that if the man is a prince and also Platy's brother, then that means Platy herself truly is royalty. Platy reminds him that she had already told him before that she is a princess. Afterward, Platy turns toward her brother and introduces Caden as her husband. This revelation immediately shocks everyone present. She then makes her position perfectly clear. Although she understands that they have come to bring her back, she declares that she will never return to the Mermaid Kingdom. Prince Arowana is unable to accept the situation. From his perspective, the matter is completely unforgivable. He believes that a land dweller has violated his beloved sister, and, on top of that, has kidnapped her as well. Everyone immediately declares that the battle should resume. Filled with anger, they insist that they will tear Caden apart and bring Platy back with them. At the same time, Platy tells Caden not to worry and assures him that there is no need to hesitate when counterattacking. However, Caden becomes distressed and explains that there is no way he can do such a thing. After all, the people standing before him are Platy's own people. Because of that, he finds himself unable to attack them seriously. Just as the mermaids are preparing to launch another assault, a familiar voice suddenly echoes across the area. Everyone turns around and discovers that the dragon lady has arrived as well. Upon seeing the tense situation, she immediately wonders what in the world is happening. The moment Platy's brother notices the dragon, he is utterly horrified. The mermaids panic as well, repeatedly shouting that it is a dragon and that they are all going to be eaten. Some of them urgently tell Prince Arowana that he needs to retreat immediately. They fear that, with a single breath, the dragon could cause the entire area to boil. The dragon lands nearby before turning her attention toward Caden. She asks whether he is all right. Caden expresses his gratitude for her assistance, thanking her for arriving when she did. In response, she casually explains that of course she came. If Caden were to disappear, she would no longer be able to enjoy the delicious meals he prepares. Hearing that, Platy quickly tells the dragon not to get overly excited, simply because she received a word of thanks. Meanwhile, Prince Arowana watches the entire exchange in complete disbelief. He cannot understand what is happening before his eyes. Everything seems far beyond common sense. The dragon then notices that only one mermaid remains standing nearby. Looking directly at him, she declares that as a reward for not running away from the daughter of a dragon, she will instantly turn him into charcoal. Before she can do anything, Caden hurriedly stops her. He tells her not to do that because the person she is threatening is actually Platy's older brother. Caden then turns toward Prince Arowana and asks whether he would be willing to have dinner with them. Since they still do not truly know one another, he suggests that they sit down and talk first. Prince Arowana immediately shouts in protest. He demands to know what Caden is scheming. From his perspective, Caden is merely a land dweller, whose character and intentions remain completely unknown. Because of that, he insists that he cannot trust a single thing Caden says. Platy then comments that her brother is correct. In her opinion, there is nothing left to discuss. She believes that he should simply return to the Mermaid Kingdom immediately. Caden quickly calls out to Platy and tells her that she should not be like that. He points out that the reason her brother traveled all the way there was because he was genuinely worried about her. Therefore, as the person involved, he believes it is his responsibility to listen to everything Prince Arowana has to say. Hearing those words, Prince Arowana remains silent for a moment. After thinking carefully, he eventually announces that he has changed his mind. As a prince, he cannot run away from a challenge because his honor is at stake. For that reason, he decides that he will accept Caden's invitation. Caden then politely asks him to conceal his lower body before joining them. Anticipating that such a situation might occur, Prince Arowana confidently produces a pair of underwear and explains that he had prepared for this possibility in advance by bringing clothes with him. After getting dressed, he follows Caden, who guides him toward the house. Watching them leave together, the dragon turns toward Platy. She remarks that Caden appears to be treating Prince Arowana to a meal. She then wonders whether this might be a good opportunity for Caden to experiment with a new dish. However, when she receives no response, she becomes curious. Looking more closely, she notices that Platy appears to be completely lost in thought. As everyone heads toward the house, Platy remains standing there quietly, deeply immersed in her thoughts while contemplating everything that has happened. The scene then cuts to the prince, whose eyes widen in disbelief as he finally realizes that the shabby-looking house before him is actually the home where Platy lives. Shocked beyond words, he immediately turns his attention toward Caden and begins accusing him in his mind, unable to comprehend how a member of the royal mermaid family could possibly be living in such a humble residence. To him, it appears completely unacceptable, and he becomes convinced that Caden must be treating Platy as nothing more than a servant. Hearing his reaction, Platy quickly calls out to her brother. However, instead of accepting his assumptions, she urges him to look beyond the house itself and pay attention to everything surrounding it. Confused, the prince shifts his gaze elsewhere, only for his eyes to widen even further as he notices an enormous structure standing nearby. He cannot help but wonder what kind of building it is. Caden calmly explains that the building serves as a storehouse. It is used to preserve the meat gathered from the mountains, as well as the vegetables harvested from the fields. The prince is immediately stunned. Not only is the structure impressive in both shape and size, but the walls themselves possess a mysterious and refined appearance unlike anything he has ever seen before. Unable to contain his curiosity, the prince questions the unusual material covering the walls. Caden explains that it is plaster made from lime he discovered in the mountains. Even this revelation leaves the prince speechless. Before he can fully process what he has learned, his attention is drawn toward another building. Caden proceeds to explain that this structure is a brewery. It is the place where various seasonings are produced, including miso and soy sauce, which are carefully prepared and left to mature over time. Platy proudly points out that this is precisely why her husband is so remarkable. She explains that he possesses knowledge that even people from other races do not have. Not only is he exceptionally skilled in cooking, but he is also incredibly powerful in battle. In her eyes, there seems to be nothing that Caden cannot accomplish. She further explains that the storehouse even doubles as her magical compounding room, and that her husband always treats her kindly and with respect. After allowing everyone to admire the surroundings, Caden invites the prince to sit down. He explains that he has recently completed a new garden table, making it the perfect place for everyone to relax while enjoying tea together. As the prince takes his seat, he suddenly notices the young girl nearby and becomes curious about her identity. Wondering where such a child came from, he asks about her. Caden then reveals the shocking truth. The girl is actually the dragon herself in human form. The revelation leaves the prince completely stunned once again. The dragon girl, however, shows little interest in his reaction. Instead, she eagerly urges Caden to bring out the new dish he has been preparing. Not long afterward, the long-awaited meal is finally served. Caden introduces the dish and explains that it is called zenzai. He reveals that while he had been cultivating soybeans, another type of bean had somehow grown alongside them by accident. Since he only managed to obtain a very small harvest, the dish is extremely limited in quantity. The prince stares at the unfamiliar food before him. He has never seen anything remotely similar before, and cannot help but wonder what kind of dish it is. The moment the prince, Platy, and the dragon girl take their first bites, all three are instantly overwhelmed by its flavor. Their expressions transform immediately as they experience a sweetness unlike anything they have ever tasted. The prince is particularly astonished by the rich and complex taste, finding it impossible to believe that something so delicious exists. Meanwhile, Platy has already begun asking for a second serving. Unfortunately for her, Caden explains that there is no more left. Since the beans had grown accidentally and only in a very small amount, he was able to prepare only a limited quantity of the dish. The announcement immediately disappoints everyone. Both Platy and the dragon girl become visibly upset. Their frustration quickly finds a target as they turn toward the prince. In their minds, his sudden arrival has perfectly coincided with the serving of the rare dish, reducing the amount available for everyone else. As a result, they direct their anger toward him and jokingly threaten to burn him for taking part of their precious meal. Faced with two furious individuals and having absolutely no way to defend himself, the prince can only drop to his knees and offer a sincere apology. After everything he has witnessed, the advanced buildings, the revolutionary knowledge, the incredible cooking, the overwhelming combat ability, and now this extraordinary dish, the prince finally reaches a conclusion. In his eyes, Caden's talents can no longer be compared to those of ordinary people. He realizes that there is likely no one else in the world capable of matching such a wide range of abilities. At that moment, the prince comes to regard Caden not merely as a skilled individual, but as someone closer to a saint or a sage, a truly extraordinary figure whose existence transcends common understanding. Caden attempts to explain that the situation is not as extraordinary as everyone is making it seem. However, the prince has already reached his conclusion. After witnessing everything with his own eyes, he has become completely convinced that his sister has genuinely fallen in love with Caden. With a sincere expression, he expresses his desire to entrust Platy's future to him for many years to come. Hearing such a serious request, Caden cannot help but question whether the prince is truly comfortable making such a decision. The matter feels far too important to be settled so casually. Caden then admits that this is actually the first time he has learned that Platy is a princess of the Mermaid Kingdom. The revelation leaves him troubled. If she possesses such a high status, then choosing a marriage partner should not be something that can be decided freely. After all, countless expectations and responsibilities from the people of her kingdom must be resting upon her shoulders. Before he can continue further, Platy immediately objects. She passionately insists that her situation is nothing like what Caden imagines. In her eyes, none of those expectations matter. As far as she is concerned, the only thing that matters is being married to him. She refuses to allow other people's opinions to determine the course of her life, believing that her future belongs solely to herself. Seeing his sister becoming increasingly emotional, the prince steps in and attempts to calm her down. He then explains to Caden that it is obvious he does not fully understand the circumstances surrounding Platy. While marriage may appear simple on the surface, there is a problem connected to it that she cannot avoid no matter how much she wishes otherwise. Just as the prince prepares to reveal the truth, the dragon lady suddenly interrupts. She calmly explains that a conflict over the sovereignty of the surface world has erupted between humans and demonic beings. What began as a struggle between those two factions has now spread to involve the mermaids, who had previously remained neutral regarding the entire dispute. Because of this growing tension, political marriages have become a tool used to secure alliances and influence. The prince immediately stares at her in astonishment, unable to understand how she possesses such detailed knowledge about a matter of international importance. The dragon lady responds with visible irritation. She questions how anyone could doubt her awareness of such affairs. Having lived for centuries, she explains that information of this scale inevitably reaches her ears whether she desires it or not. Matters involving entire races and kingdoms are impossible for someone like her to ignore. Listening to the explanation, Caden finally begins piecing everything together. He realizes that this world is currently divided by an enormous conflict between humanity and magical races. Furthermore, as the summoned hero destined to fight against magical beings, he himself occupies a central position within that struggle. The prince continues the explanation. At this very moment, proposals and engagement offers from both human nations and magical factions are arriving one after another. The Mermaid Kingdom is being pressured to choose a side. If they support humanity, they risk making enemies of the magical races. If they support the magical races, they risk becoming enemies of humanity. However, if they refuse to choose either side and attempt to remain neutral, both factions may eventually turn against them. In that scenario, the kingdom would become the target of attacks from every direction. Because of this crisis, the highest echelons of the Mermaid Kingdom have been discussing which race Platy should marry into. Her marriage has effectively become a political tool intended to determine the future of the entire nation. The prince believes that Platy understood this reality all too well. Most likely, she concluded that the only way to save her kingdom from being forced into a difficult decision was to remove herself from the equation entirely. By disappearing, she hoped to free her country from the burden of choosing through her. It was during this period of escape that she encountered Caden, a man living peacefully in a remote place, untouched by the conflicts and political schemes of the world. As her older brother, the prince simply wants to see her wish fulfilled and her happiness protected. Turning toward his sister, the prince admits that he is genuinely grateful she was able to meet someone as kind and dependable as Caden. Then, in an act that shocks everyone present, the prince lowers himself onto his knees once again. With complete sincerity, he bows his head before Caden and asks him one final time to protect Platy and officially marry her. Embarrassed by such a dramatic gesture, Caden quickly tells him that there is no need to go that far. If everyone truly agrees with it, then he is willing to make their relationship official, and before he can even finish speaking, the Dragon Lady suddenly cuts him off. She asks him directly whether he is truly planning to get married. Caden simply answers that he is. The Dragon Lady immediately declares that if that is the case, then she is going to get married as well. The unexpected announcement leaves everyone completely speechless. Platy, especially, cannot comprehend what she has just heard and immediately questions what in the world the dragon is talking about. Remaining perfectly serious, the Dragon Lady explains her reasoning. For quite some time, she has been wondering how she could obtain the Holy Sword, currently in Caden's possession. Since marriage would create a close relationship between them, she has apparently concluded that marrying him herself might be the most effective solution. The absurd declaration instantly throws the entire conversation into chaos, leaving everyone stunned by the Dragon Lady's completely unexpected proposal and the bizarre motivation behind it. The Dragon Lady then begins presenting what she believes are perfectly reasonable arguments in favor of marriage. From her perspective, getting married would allow both parties to share their possessions and benefits. Furthermore, considering that a human lifespan is nothing more than a brief moment compared to the lifespan of a dragon, she sees no downside to the arrangement. Most importantly, becoming Caden's wife would guarantee her access to his delicious cooking every single day. After listing all of these advantages, she confidently asks Caden whether he is willing to marry her. To her complete shock, Caden immediately refuses. The answer strikes her like a bolt of lightning. Completely stunned, she demands to know why he rejected her so quickly. Caden calmly explains that the reason is simple. He already has Platy. The Dragon Lady, however, sees no issue with that explanation. She argues that Caden is a powerful man, and that strong males having multiple female partners is perfectly normal. In her eyes, there is absolutely nothing strange about such a situation. Unfortunately for her, Caden immediately rejects that line of reasoning as well. He firmly explains that regardless of how strong others might consider him, he has no interest in polygamy. Furthermore, he reminds her that he is not her master, nor does he view their relationship in such a way. The Dragon Lady's expression instantly collapses. Moments later, tears begin forming in her eyes. Then she starts crying. Not just ordinary crying, but loud, dramatic crying that echoes throughout the area. Through her sobs, she wonders if the reason for his rejection is because she is not as strong as the undead king. Caden quickly tries to explain that such a thing has absolutely nothing to do with it. However, the Dragon Lady continues crying without listening. She then asks if perhaps he simply hates her. Once again, Caden denies it immediately, insisting that he does not hate her at all. The Dragon Lady instantly seizes upon that response. If he does not hate her, and strength is not the issue, then in her mind there is only one logical conclusion left. Therefore, she once again insists that he should marry her. Faced with her relentless tears, and unable to think of any other way to stop the situation from escalating further, Caden finally gives in. He tells her that she should stop crying and reluctantly agrees. The transformation in the Dragon Lady's mood is immediate. Only moments ago she had been sobbing uncontrollably, yet now she becomes overwhelmingly happy, her face lighting up with joy. Caden can only awkwardly apologize to the prince for allowing such a ridiculous scene to unfold right in front of him. Rather than being offended, the prince simply smiles wryly. He remarks that fathers with daughters all around the world probably experience situations like this sooner or later. To him, the entire scene feels strangely familiar. Meanwhile, Platy watches everything unfold with mixed emotions. Although she has managed to secure Kaiden's affection, she cannot help thinking that having another woman involved is still incredibly annoying. Not long afterward, the scene shifts to a quieter moment where only Kaiden and Platy are together. Platy explains that her brother has already returned to the Mermaid Kingdom in order to report everything to their father and mother. If the king and queen grant their approval, then there will be nothing standing in the way of their official marriage. Kaiden listens carefully as she speaks. Even so, Platy cannot hide her uncertainty. She asks him whether it is truly acceptable for things to proceed this way. For the first time, she openly reflects upon everything that has happened since she left her homeland. The burden placed upon her by the kingdom had eventually become unbearable. Unable to endure it any longer, she chose to run away from home. Then, through a series of circumstances, she met Kaiden. After being discovered, she was more or less forced into becoming his bride. At first, the entire situation had been strange and unexpected, yet despite that, she has genuinely enjoyed her life there. His cooking is always delicious. The days are peaceful. Most importantly, she wants to remain by his side forever. Still, doubts linger within her heart. She worries that she may simply be causing trouble for him. At the same time, returning to the Mermaid Kingdom is no longer an option she can easily choose. Seeing her anxiety, Kaiden smiles gently. He tells her that it is unusual to see her acting so uncertain. After learning about her circumstances, his feelings have not changed at all. He has no intention of altering the life they currently share. Kaiden then speaks about himself. He explains that he received a power from the gods known as the Master of Supremacy. However, that power proved largely useless in actual combat. As a result, he eventually came to this remote place to live a quiet life, away from the expectations placed upon heroes. He admits that he is not some overwhelmingly powerful human, as others imagine him to be. What truly matters to him is something much simpler. He wants them to pursue a happy life together. Because of that, he asks Platy to remain by his side from this day forward. The words strike directly at Platy's heart. Unable to contain her happiness, she immediately rushes forward and wraps her arms around him in a warm embrace. For a brief moment, the atmosphere becomes peaceful and heartfelt. Unfortunately, that moment does not last long. Almost as if she had been waiting for the worst possible timing, the Dragon Lady suddenly appears. She immediately complains about being ignored and demands to know how much longer Kaiden intends to make her wait. Before anyone can respond, she begins throwing another tantrum. This time, however, the reason is much simpler. She is hungry. Kaiden cannot help but sigh. Realizing that the day has become far more eventful than expected, he decides that preparing a special meal would be the perfect way to celebrate. He announces that he will treat everyone to a feast as a wedding gift. The declaration immediately excites Platy, who becomes visibly delighted at the prospect of another one of Kaiden's meals. The Dragon Lady is equally enthusiastic. She declares that she does not care what he cooks as long as it is delicious. All she wants is for him to hurry up and make the food. With both women eagerly awaiting the feast, and Kaiden heading off to prepare yet another extraordinary meal, the day moves forward in a surprisingly cheerful atmosphere, despite all of the chaos that had unfolded only moments before. The following day, Kaiden realizes that he desperately needs more help. Hearing this, Platy immediately brings him another starfish, believing that it might solve his problem. However, Kaiden explains that this is not what he means at all. What he truly needs are workers. At the moment, he has far too many responsibilities on his shoulders. He wants to take care of the fields and harvest the crops that have already fully matured. In addition to that, ever since he started producing miso and soy sauce, his workload has increased significantly, leaving him with very little free time. On top of everything else, he now wishes to build a proper home as a married man. While Kaiden is thinking about all of this, the Undead King suddenly appears and remarks that the situation sounds wonderful. Startled by his unexpected presence, Kaiden immediately notices him and wonders whether something has happened. The Undead King explains that nothing is wrong. He simply has some free time and decided to stop by and spend a while with them. As a gift, he presents Kaiden with another mana stone as a souvenir. Kaiden is delighted upon seeing it. The stone is much larger than expected, and he quickly realizes how useful it will be. He explains that such a large mana stone will allow him to create numerous household tools. For someone who is constantly short-handed and overwhelmed with work, it is the perfect resource. He further explains that Platy's brother recently pointed out several important things to him. Because of that advice, he has decided to create something completely different from anything he has built before. This time, he intends to put all of his effort and dedication into constructing a proper home. As the discussion continues, Platy suggests that perhaps Sensei could help them. Caden immediately dismisses the idea as unthinkable. Although he briefly considered that having the undead king create the house himself would certainly be much faster, he never seriously intended to ask for such assistance. Hearing this, Sensei begins asking how many people Caden requires and whether he should bring them over. The sudden question leaves Caden confused. Sensei then asks whether 10 individuals would be sufficient for the task. Caden replies that he would be extremely grateful for any help, but he cannot imagine where such workers would even come from. Without providing any further explanation, Sensei departs and asks everyone to wait for a short while. After some time passes, he returns accompanied by 10 figures. They consist of 5 orcs and 5 goblins, all of whom are humanoid monsters originating from his dungeon. Sensei explains that these monsters were born within his dungeon and therefore obey his commands completely. He has already ordered them to follow the instructions of the Holy Saint, and therefore Caden is free to use them however he sees fit. Caden is surprised and wonders whether it is truly acceptable for him to receive such assistance. He politely introduces himself to the monsters, but none of them respond. Sensei then clarifies the situation. The monsters do not possess the ability to speak. Although they have enough intelligence to understand and carry out instructions, they lack true self-awareness. Furthermore, they do not possess ordinary survival instincts, like living beings. Their existence is also remarkably convenient. They do not require rewards for their labor, nor do they need food. Instead, they absorb the mana present in the surrounding atmosphere and use it to sustain themselves. This explanation makes Platy extremely happy. From her perspective, every problem has now been solved perfectly. Turning toward Caden, she seeks confirmation that everything is indeed settled. Caden readily agrees and acknowledges that the situation could not have turned out better. He then sincerely thanks Sensei for the tremendous assistance. Sensei modestly brushes aside the gratitude, saying that it is nothing worth mentioning, before departing and wishing him success in building his new home. Filled with excitement and motivation, Caden enthusiastically announces that everyone should combine their strengths and work together to create a splendid house. However, the complete lack of reaction from the monsters leaves him feeling unexpectedly empty. Despite that, he immediately begins assigning tasks and organizing the work. As time passes, he discovers that the monsters are far more capable than he originally expected. The orcs possess powerful physiques that make them exceptionally suited for heavy manual labor. The goblins, on the other hand, are much smaller, but their size allows them to perform delicate tasks with remarkable dexterity. Although they often make mistakes when assigned complicated work, they gradually improve whenever they are taught patiently. Little by little, they learn from experience and become steadily more competent. There is nothing particularly unusual about receiving assistance, yet watching them work day after day begins to affect Caden in an unexpected way. Without even realizing it, he gradually becomes kinder and more considerate toward them. Observing both Caden and the monsters, Platy warns him not to become too emotionally attached. She reminds him that these beings are creations formed entirely from mana. Because of that, they cannot truly be regarded as living creatures in the same sense as ordinary people. Caden understands her point and acknowledges that she is probably correct. Even so, as he watches them diligently carry out their tasks, he cannot help but feel that everyone deserves an opportunity to live and exist in their own way. Platy explains that humanoid monsters, like the goblins and orcs, have long been used by magical beings in large-scale wars against humanity. Entire armies of such creatures were sent into battle with strategies built around the assumption that they would eventually be wiped out. Since these monsters originated from dungeons, they could simply be replaced whenever they were lost. Their lives were treated as expendable resources rather than individuals with value. Caden finds it difficult to fully accept that way of thinking. Even if that had been the reality of the world for a long time, he cannot ignore everything the monsters have done for him, from helping prepare meals to handling waste disposal and assisting with countless daily tasks. They have become an essential part of his life. Nevertheless, he reminds himself that this is simply the kind of world he now lives in. As he continues watching the workers, he suddenly notices one of the goblins stumble and fall. Concern immediately fills him, and he rushes over to check on the goblin. He carefully examines him, wondering whether he has been injured anywhere. At first, there is no response, just as usual. Because of this, Caden once again feels the familiar frustration of being unable to communicate with them. Deep down, he genuinely wishes he could talk with them. Then something completely unexpected happens. The goblin suddenly speaks. The creature calmly states that he is all right. The words leave Caden frozen in shock. Platy is equally astonished by what she has just witnessed. Unable to believe his ears, Caden immediately asks again whether the goblin is truly unharmed. The goblin confirms that he is fine and then expresses a desire to continue working. Soon after, the other goblins begin gathering around Caden one after another. To everyone's surprise, they also begin speaking. Each of them eagerly expresses a wish to keep working and contribute even more. Observing the scene, Platy concludes that the monsters appear to have developed self-awareness. Caden, overwhelmed by emotion, nearly bursts into tears. He argues that self-awareness should not be something that appears so suddenly and so easily. However, as he thinks about it more carefully, he remembers the extraordinary power he received through his absolute supremacy skill. The realization immediately dawns on him. This phenomenon is most likely connected to that ability. The thought amazes him beyond words. Such a power is far greater than he initially imagined, and he realizes that he must handle it with extreme caution. At the same time, however, he cannot suppress his happiness. For the first time, he can truly communicate with the monsters. Overcome with gratitude, Caden embraces them and thanks them sincerely. From that moment onward, he understands that things have changed completely. Now that they possess self-awareness and can communicate, simply using them and abandoning them afterward is no longer an option. Time passes, and eventually the construction project reaches its conclusion. At last, the house is complete. Not long afterward, the Dragon Lady arrives and is immediately left speechless by what she sees. During the period she was away, an enormous transformation has taken place. Platy proudly explains that there is no need for astonishment, because this magnificent building is the love nest she and her dear husband have created together. The dragon's eyes immediately light up with excitement. Without hesitation, she decides that she wants to explore the entire house. Platy attempts to stop her and asks her to wait for a moment, but the dragon has already rushed inside before anyone can stop her. As she explores the building, she notices that she has never seen a structure like this before. Everything feels completely unfamiliar to her. Caden quickly calls out to her and explains that she must remove her shoes before entering certain areas so that nothing inside becomes damaged. The dragon complies and begins rolling around excitedly throughout the house. Eventually, she discovers the bedding and becomes fascinated by it. The softness and comfort are unlike anything she has experienced before, leaving her thoroughly impressed. Watching the scene unfold, Platy remarks that it seems the dragon intends to stay there permanently. Caden simply responds that this possibility is exactly why he constructed such a large house in the first place. Platy then narrows her eyes and wonders whether he intends to allow the humanoid monsters to live there as well. Caden admits that this was actually his original plan. However, when he suggested it to the monsters, they immediately rejected the idea. They explained that such a wonderful home should belong to Caden and Platy alone. Their own home was originally the dungeon, and they would feel uncomfortable occupying such an incredible place. Furthermore, forcing them to live there might create complications for Sensei as well. As a result, Caden proposes a different solution. He suggests constructing a tent village nearby where the monsters can stay comfortably. The area can become a dedicated settlement that everyone informally refers to as the Monster Tent House. Caden then reveals that the house itself is still far from complete. There are many additional facilities he hopes to build in the future, including a proper bathroom and kitchen. Accomplishing those goals will require plenty of assistance, and he wonders whether the monsters would be willing to continue helping him. Without hesitation, they eagerly agree. Meanwhile, Platy can only stare in disbelief, wondering what has happened to the peaceful love nest she originally imagined. A short while later, one of the goblins approaches. Caden introduces him as Gobu Kichi. He explains that among all the goblins, Gobu Kichi is the most talented when it comes to sewing and crafting fabric-related items. Gobu Kichi reports that the item Caden requested has finally been completed. Curious, both Caden and Platy follow him inside. There, they discover a special surprise waiting for them. Caden reveals that the gift has been prepared specifically for Platy. In order to create it, he cultivated cotton alongside the grass used for making tatami mats. He devoted considerable effort to the project because he desperately wanted their new home to contain a proper futon. He encourages Platy to try lying down on it. Platy carefully settles onto the futon and is immediately overwhelmed by its comfort. The sensation is so pleasant that she becomes completely speechless. Seeing her reaction fills Caden with relief and happiness. He admits that he feels guilty for having made her sleep on simple wooden boards for so long. Platy warmly thanks him for the thoughtful gift. She then turns toward Gobu Kichi and expresses her gratitude to him as well. The unexpected praise causes Gobu Kichi to become visibly flustered. Watching this scene fills Caden with determination. With renewed enthusiasm, he declares that he will continue giving his absolute best from now on. Their cultivation-based lifestyle has only just begun, and he is convinced that things are going to become even better from this point forward. The scene then shifts to Gobukichi as he fills a bucket with water. While carrying out the simple task, he suddenly notices a ship in the distance and immediately wonders what the strange vessel could be. The narrative then cuts to Caden, who is handing a cup of water to the prince. Observing the prince's expression, Caden senses that something is troubling him. The prince reflects on the astonishing residence standing before them and concludes that constructing such a magnificent house must have required a special blessing from the gods. As the two sit together, the prince explains that the matter weighing on his mind concerns Caden and Platy's marriage. He reveals that news of their union will soon spread across the nations, and that he has already consulted his father regarding the matter. Initially, the king is bewildered by the proposal, but after learning about Caden's personality, capabilities, and character, he eventually gives his approval. The prince especially notes that despite possessing tremendous strength, Caden does not belong to any particular race, a factor that works in his favor. Caden expresses his gratitude for the king's acceptance, yet he remains concerned about Platy, who has been burdened by the expectations surrounding a political marriage. He wonders about the reactions of both humans and magical beings. The prince admits that many among them are displeased. Nevertheless, his father, the Mermaid King, publicly proclaims that his daughter Platy will marry the Holy Saint. Caden finds it difficult to believe that such a declaration is enough to convince everyone. The prince explains that resentment certainly remains among those who have lost the opportunity to make Platy their wife. However, because hostile factions are also targeting her, many have concluded that allowing the marriage to proceed is the safest option. Understanding the situation, Caden remarks that the opposition has merely withdrawn for the time being. At that moment, however, he notices that the prince has once again dropped to his knees before him. The prince earnestly pledges that his people will do everything possible to avoid causing trouble, and humbly entrusts Platy's future to Caden. Embarrassed by such a display, Caden urges him to stop. He admits that he genuinely enjoys being with Platy and is deeply grateful for everything she has done for him. He recalls arriving in this world completely alone. Had he never met Platy, he believes he would still be wandering aimlessly, unaware of his surroundings, much like Sensei. He might even have forgotten his own name. The prince becomes curious about the identity of this Sensei. Caden quickly clarifies that Sensei is simply their neighbor, the undead king, who is also known as the lifeless king. Just then, the peaceful conversation is abruptly interrupted when someone rushes over with alarming news. An enemy attack has begun along the coast. A large force of monsters has landed, and they are accompanied by magical beings. At that very moment, the orcs and goblins are already engaged in battle against the invaders. The prince is instantly filled with anger. He cannot believe that the magical beings have somehow discovered this place. The revelation seems impossible, considering that the location is supposed to be one of the kingdom's most closely guarded secrets. Rushing outside, Caden immediately suspects that the attackers must have arrived aboard the mysterious ship that had been spotted earlier. Upon reaching the battlefield, he questions one of the orcs regarding the identity of a particular woman among the enemy forces. The orc informs him that she is Astra of MOW. The moment Caden hears the word MOW and notices the woman's remarkably large chest, he cannot help but feel that the title somehow suits her perfectly. The woman immediately notices his gaze and reacts with visible irritation. She then proudly introduces herself as Astra of Deception, a demon lord, and one of the 4 heavenly kings. A goblin nearby explains the situation further, stating that she had arrived with the intention of killing their lord. However, before she could accomplish her objective, they successfully captured her. Caden finds that explanation difficult to believe and begins questioning the circumstances. His attention then shifts toward a group of soldiers standing nearby. Curious about their identity, he asks what those pawns are. The goblin promptly explains that they are skeleton soldiers commanded by the magical beings, undead warriors serving as part of the invading force's army. The battlefield quickly settles after the clash, revealing the extent of the destruction. Nearly 100 bodies are scattered across the area, yet every single one of the invading enemies has been completely exterminated. Witnessing the aftermath leaves Caden utterly shocked. Although he is fully aware of how powerful his companions are, he cannot help but scold them for taking such dangerous risks. The thought of losing any of them deeply troubles him, and he admits that he would genuinely cry if something happened to them. His words immediately affect the monsters, causing them to become emotional as well. They begin crying and passionately declare that they would gladly give their lives for their lord. Amid the emotional scene, Astra grows increasingly irritated as everyone continues to ignore her presence. Meanwhile, the prince steps forward and confronts Astra's, demanding to know how the demons discovered such a secret location. Astra instantly recognizes him as the prince of the mermaid kingdom. She mocks the mermaids, claiming that years of peace have made them complacent and foolish. According to her, the demons possess an exceptional intelligence-gathering network, and she ridicules the mermaids as simple-minded creatures who could never comprehend the extent of their information network. She boasts that escaping captivity would be effortless for someone like her. Astra then reveals the purpose of her mission. She explains that she has been ordered to retrieve the mermaid princess and eliminate the so-called bride thief, the holy saint. After examining the situation, she concludes that Caden must be the holy saint she has been sent to kill. Those present immediately recognize her reputation. Astra is known as a member of the Demon Lord's upper circle and carries a fearsome title associated with bloodshed. On countless battlefields, she has earned the reputation of being a monster whose brutality causes even her own allies to tremble in fear. The prince becomes furious upon hearing her declaration and prepares to act. However, Caden quickly attempts to calm him down before the situation escalates further. At that very moment, another familiar figure arrives. Sensei appears and casually suggests that everyone should try to calm down. He comments that, for some reason, the area has become unusually noisy. The prince is instantly stunned upon seeing him. Caden then introduces Sensei, explaining that he is the very individual he mentioned earlier. Not only does the prince react with shock, but even Astra is left speechless at the sight before her. The prince can hardly believe what he is witnessing. He realizes that Sensei is one of the world's 2 calamity-class beings, and asks Caden whether he truly knows the undead king, the lifeless king himself. Caden awkwardly admits that the description is more or less correct. Sensei casually remarks that he overheard someone talking about killing the holy saint. While he remains calm, Astra can only stare in complete confusion. The situation unfolding before her makes absolutely no sense, and she struggles to understand what is happening. Before she can gather her thoughts, Astra notices yet another unbelievable presence. Standing before her is a dragon. At that moment, Caden approaches and greets the dragon. Platy is also accompanying her. Concerned for his safety, Platy checks whether Caden is unharmed. He reassures her that everything is fine, and that everyone has helped protect him. The prince immediately rushes over to Platy and questions where she has been all this time. It is then revealed that she and the dragon had been searching for eggs in the mountains. During their search, they happened to spot a demon ship sailing across the ocean. Their curiosity led them to investigate, which is why they have now arrived at the battlefield. After learning the details, the dragon turns her attention toward Astris. Upon hearing that the demon intends to harm her master, she becomes extremely hostile. She declares that anyone who threatens her master automatically becomes her enemy as well. To her, demons are no better than insignificant worms, and she confidently proclaims that she could wipe out their entire race if she wished. Caden immediately scolds the dragon for her excessive remarks. Realizing she has gone too far, she quickly apologizes and calms down. Caden then turns his attention toward Astra and apologizes for the misunderstanding. Rather than continuing the conflict, he proposes a peaceful solution. If the demons promise not to act hostile toward them again, he is willing to let them leave and return home safely. Astra is deeply offended by what she perceives as pity. She proudly reminds everyone that she is one of the 4 heavenly kings serving under the Demon Lord. Although fear begins creeping into her heart as she surveys the overwhelming forces gathered around Caden, she forces herself to regain her composure. She reminds herself that she carries the pride and authority of the Demon King's army. Determined not to lose face, Astra proposes an alternative. She challenges Caden to a one-on-one duel. According to her conditions, if Caden defeats her, she will listen to whatever he has to say. The dragon instantly explodes with anger upon hearing the challenge. Convinced that Astra is plotting something, she eagerly volunteers to incinerate the demon immediately. However, Caden once again intervenes and orders everyone to stop. He declares that he has made up his mind to protect the peaceful life he has built. Although he possesses many powerful allies, he reminds himself that he is still only a human being. Therefore, he accepts Astras's challenge and prepares to face her himself. Astra initially believes she still has a chance. As long as she can capture Caden, she assumes everything will work out in her favor. However, the moment she notices the legendary evil sword in his possession, her confidence completely vanishes. The overwhelming shock proves too much for her to handle. Before the duel can even begin, Astra loses consciousness and collapses on the spot. The dragon immediately suggests burying her where she fell and turning her into fertilizer for the fields belonging to her master. Kaden is horrified by the proposal and loudly refuses, insisting that they absolutely cannot do something like that. The scene then transitions to a later moment, where the dragon finds herself tasked with escorting Astra back home. She is visibly annoyed by the responsibility and repeatedly questions why she has to transport the demon personally. Kaden supports the decision by explaining that the demon sailors were so terrified after witnessing a dragon that they abandoned Astra entirely and retreated without her. As the two travel through the sky, Astra finally asks the dragon a question that has been bothering her. She wants to know why such a powerful dragon would willingly serve an ordinary human like Kaden. The dragon responds in a manner that leaves Astra even more confused. She claims that there is one thing she absolutely cannot reveal to anyone: the incredible deliciousness of her master's cooking. To her, those meals are a treasure beyond comparison. Hearing such an absurd answer, Astra can only stare blankly into the distance. As they continue flying through the sky, she finds herself wondering more than ever who Kaden truly is, and what kind of person could gather such extraordinary beings around him. The scene then shifts to Kaden, who immediately questions Astra about why she has come back once again. It is clear that she has something she wishes to discuss with him. Before she can properly explain herself, however, Platy instantly begins throwing handfuls of salt in Astra's direction, aggressively trying to drive her away and insisting that she return home at once. Kaden quickly steps in to calm Platy down before the situation escalates further. Once the commotion settles, he turns his attention back to Astra and asks whether something serious has happened. Instead of Astra answering immediately, one of her subordinates steps forward and pleads with Kaden to hear them out. He explains that they have all been expelled from the Demon King's army. Astra immediately corrects him, stating that the situation is not exactly as he describes. According to her, she alone has been driven out of the Demon King's army. The others are still expected to return and continue serving within the military ranks. The moment she says this, her subordinates strongly object. They insist that she should stop saying such things and passionately declare that they intend to devote themselves entirely to serving Astra no matter what happens. Seeing the unusual circumstances, Kaden finally asks whether something significant has occurred. At that very moment, the dragon suddenly appears and complains about the excessive noise. Annoyed by the disturbance, she threatens to burn everyone present. Kaden immediately responds by warning her that he will cut off her meals if she causes trouble. The threat proves remarkably effective, and she instantly transforms back into her human form. Once the situation is under control again, Kaden returns to the matter at hand. He asks Astra whether it is really true that she has been dismissed from the Demon King's army. Astra calmly explains the circumstances. She failed in the mission entrusted to her, namely the task of bringing the princess back. Furthermore, all of the monsters that accompanied her were completely annihilated. To make matters worse, a dragon became involved in the battlefield and caused widespread chaos. Such an incident is considered a grave offense. Kaden becomes completely confused by this explanation. He cannot understand why a dragon would become involved in a conflict between humans and demons in the first place. Meanwhile, Vale casually remarks that she merely sent the demon back to where she belonged. Continuing her explanation, Astra reveals that following the incident, her title as one of the 4 heavenly kings was stripped away. Afterward, she was formally exiled from the Demon Kingdom. One of her subordinates immediately voices his dissatisfaction with the verdict. In his opinion, the court-martial itself was suspicious from the very beginning. The decision was made hastily, without the Demon King being present, and he believes that Astra was unfairly forced into this predicament. Another subordinate agrees wholeheartedly. He points out that the individual responsible is Sir Ravian, a man known for constantly plotting and scheming behind the scenes. In his view, Ravian is undoubtedly preparing another scheme even now. Astra, however, refuses to place the blame on anyone else. She states that no one is necessarily at fault. Within the Demon King's army, strength is valued above everything else. Since she failed to accomplish the mission she was assigned, she believes that she herself is the pathetic one and therefore bears responsibility for the outcome. As Kaden listens to the entire story, he begins to suspect that the uproar caused by the previous incident may be the reason she lost her position. Nevertheless, he cannot shake the feeling that there may be more to the situation than what appears on the surface. The dragon then directly asks Astra what exactly she wishes to discuss. At the same time, Platy suspiciously wonders whether Astra has come to demand that they take responsibility for everything that happened. Astra immediately rejects that assumption. She explains that this is not the reason she has come. The truth is that she must now begin a completely new life. In order to do that, there is something she desperately wants to understand. She explains that for the first time in her life, she has encountered goblins and orcs whose strength surpasses even her own. Not only that, these monsters possess self-awareness and are capable of speaking, something that should have been impossible according to everything she knows. Beyond that, she cannot understand why two world-class calamities, the dragon and the life-risk king, choose to follow Kaden. Unable to suppress her curiosity any longer, Astra lowers herself onto her knees and humbly begs Kaden to allow her to work under him for a while. Both Platy and the dragon are left utterly bewildered by this unexpected request. Kaden, on the other hand, immediately agrees. He explains that he does not know whether working there will truly provide the answer she seeks. However, he respects the fact that she is attempting to rediscover herself and is willing to step forward into an unfamiliar path. Because of that, he sincerely wishes to help her. The dragon quickly points out that assisting Astra may result in demons coming after him again in the future with the intention of killing him. Kaden responds without hesitation. If such a day truly arrives, then when that time comes, he will face whatever challenges await him head-on. The subordinates immediately ask whether they can stay as well. Kaden readily agrees, telling them that they are welcome to remain and work while they are there. However, he sets a single condition. Bloodshed is strictly forbidden. Both Platy and the dragon woman cannot help but think that Kaden is far too naive. Astra, on the other hand, accepts his terms without hesitation. She declares that as long as she remains there, she will obey him completely. No matter what task he assigns or what humiliation she must endure, she is willing to accept it. All she asks is that he make use of her abilities. Hearing this, Kaden says that he already has a request for her. The scene then shifts to the three demon women performing fieldwork. Initially, Kaden had intended to assign them ordinary household chores. However, Astra had insisted that agricultural labor would be more suitable for them, claiming that her abilities were specialized for such work. As they begin, one of the subordinates notices Astra repeatedly striking the exact same spot in the ground. Astra wonders whether she is doing something incorrectly. The subordinate explains that the tool she is holding is called a hoe. It is used to dig into the soil and create ridges where seeds can later be planted. There is a proper method to using it, and simply attacking one location repeatedly will not accomplish the task efficiently. Kaden watches this exchange and remarks that the subordinate seems surprisingly knowledgeable. The subordinate modestly explains that she is a commoner. Unlike the others, she has experience with this kind of labor. Astra and Bella were born into the aristocratic class of the Demon Nation. They grew up as noble young ladies and never had to concern themselves with agricultural work, so she believes this responsibility should be left to her. Astra immediately objects. Turning toward Platy, she insists that nobody needs to worry about her. She has already resolved herself to serve the Holy Saint regardless of the circumstances. Whether the work is glamorous or degrading does not matter. She intends to see it through. Watching her determination, Kaden cannot help but think that demons can be surprisingly sincere and straightforward as well. Afterward, he begins assigning specific duties. He instructs Platy to work together with the goblins to create ridges throughout the field. Astra and Bella are then ordered to plant seeds within those ridges, making sure to leave a 30-centimeter gap between each seed. With their tasks assigned, everyone returns to work. As Astra continues planting, she gradually begins to suffer. She can feel a sharp ache spreading through her lower back. The discomfort becomes worse with every movement. She silently endures the pain while reflecting on how unimaginable this experience is. Never in her life had she expected simple farm work to be this exhausting and physically demanding. Suddenly, Bella lets out a loud cry. Startled, Bella points toward the soil and excitedly reports that there is something living beneath the ground. Whatever it is, it appears to be wriggling around underneath the dirt. Astra attempts to turn around and investigate, but the moment she twists her body, a painful sensation shoots through her lower back, forcing her to stop. Observing the two of them, Kaden begins to suspect that this kind of rural lifestyle may simply be impossible for women who were raised as noble ladies in the Demon Kingdom. Before long, the next task arrives. This time, it is hunting. The moment Astra hears this, her spirits immediately rise. Unlike farming, this is the sort of work she understands. As a warrior, hunting is far more suited to her talents than digging through dirt and planting seeds. Confidently, she turns toward Platy and asks what kind of prey they are pursuing. Platy explains that they are hunting square boars. The village's meat reserves need replenishing, and bringing back fresh game will help restore their stockpile. Upon hearing this, Astra eagerly volunteers herself. She declares that this mission should be left entirely to her. After the embarrassment she suffered in the fields, this is the perfect opportunity to redeem herself and restore her honor. Filled with confidence, she prepares herself for battle. Soon afterward, she notices movement ahead. A large group of square boars comes charging directly toward their position. Seeing the approaching herd, Astra immediately steps forward, convinced that this is her moment to shine. She prepares herself to demonstrate the strength that once earned her recognition within the Demon King's army. However, before she can even make a move, something unbelievable happens. The goblins have already finished the hunt. By the time Astra properly realizes what is occurring, the charging boars have already been dealt with. The goblins dispatch them so efficiently and effortlessly that she is left standing there without having contributed anything at all. Once again, the opportunity she hoped would restore her dignity slips away before her eyes. The sight before them leaves Astra deep in thought. She begins wondering just how strong the axes and sickles carried by those villagers truly are. Platy then reveals an astonishing fact, explaining that every one of those tools and weapons is forged from mana metal. The revelation shocks both Astra and the others. Not only are the tools made from mana metal, but the purity of the metal itself is exceptionally high, something that is considered incredibly rare. Bella finally understands the true extent of the villagers' strength. When she first encountered them, they already seemed unmatched, yet at that time they had not even possessed proper weapons. Platy then asks Astra whether she realizes that even the hoe used earlier had also been made from mana metal. The next day, Astra cannot seem to find Kaden and Platy anywhere. Bella informs her that they appear to be out in the sea, taking care of some kind of errand. Astra mentions that she has already finished harvesting the requested vegetables and wonders if there is anything else that needs to be done. Bella tells her that there are still weeds that need to be pulled from the area. After that, they will have to clean the house as well. At that moment, the dragon suddenly teases them, declaring that anyone who does not work will eventually die. Hearing that, Bella questions how that logic applies to the dragon herself. The dragon immediately asks what they are mumbling about and proudly claims that she is performing the important duty of watching over the house. Both Bella and Betty silently think that it certainly would be reassuring if that person ever actually returned. Since he is away, someone should indeed guard the house. The scene then shifts to Platy, who is clearly enjoying herself in the sea. She remarks that it is good to return to this form from time to time. Kaden responds by saying that he knew it all along and wonders whether she feels more comfortable spending time in the sea than she does on land. However, Platy explains that it makes little difference to her. The medicine she creates for the land dwellers is of the highest quality, and her life on land is comfortable as well. Hearing that, Kaden cannot help thinking about how considerate a wife she truly is. He then asks what it was that she wanted to discuss. Platy explains that sea monsters frequently appear in this region. Just as there are cave dungeons and mountain dungeons, there are also dungeons hidden beneath the ocean. She goes on to explain that many things originate from these monsters. The field fertilizers, the disappearing herrings, and even starfish are actually monsters as well. Kaden is surprised by this revelation. Platy confirms that it is true. Some monsters prove useful, while others are nothing but trouble. Deep beneath the ocean, there is a particularly dangerous monster lurking in the depths. She reveals that the creature is among the top 5 monsters she least wants to encounter. However, if Kaden is with her, even such a terrifying monster would be nothing more than an easy opponent. Kaden immediately thinks that there is no way he can allow Platy to go alone, but he wonders how he can accompany her underwater. Platy explains that she anticipated this possibility and presents him with a water-breathing medicine. She instructs him to place it in his mouth. As long as he continues chewing it, he will be able to breathe underwater. However, the medicine is still incomplete. If he accidentally chews actual seaweed instead, the effect will disappear. Because of that, she carefully warns him not to swallow it. Once the preparations are complete, the two of them dive into the ocean with a splash. Kaden is amazed by the experience. He truly can breathe underwater. Platy signals for him to follow her. As he swims after her, Kaden realizes something he had somehow forgotten because she spends so much time on the surface. Platy is genuinely a mermaid. The beautiful princess swimming before him is his wife. The realization causes a faint blush to appear on his face. Noticing his strange expression, Platy swims closer and asks whether something is wrong. She wonders if moving underwater is difficult for him and asks whether he is still properly chewing the seaweed medicine. Caden quickly assures her that everything is perfectly fine. His reaction only leaves Platy thinking that he is acting incredibly strange. Suddenly, Platy notices something unusual within the water. She senses the salt mixing with the minerals, all of it carried by an intense and dense thirst for blood. Caden immediately wonders what could possibly be approaching. Moments later, the answer reveals itself. The creature known as Reincarnated finally appears. The monster is enormous. Its massive body dominates the surrounding waters, making its presence impossible to ignore. Platy quickly informs Caden that she will immobilize the creature's movements and leave the rest to him. Without hesitation, she rushes forward and throws one of her medicines toward the monster. To Caden's surprise, the medicine begins burning even underwater. Platy's collection of magical herbs and medicines truly is extraordinary. Taking advantage of the opening she creates, Caden charges forward. With overwhelming strength, he tears the gigantic monster apart. Watching the battle unfold, Platy thinks that it is exactly what she expected from him. He performs wonderfully. With the threat eliminated, Platy declares that their task is complete and suggests that they return home immediately. However, Caden asks her to wait for a moment. Instead of leaving, he swims toward a nearby area and begins cutting something. Platy notices that he is gathering seaweed. The sight confuses her. That particular seaweed cannot even be used for magical herbs. It grows so rapidly that it is generally considered a nuisance. She cannot understand what Caden intends to do with it. In response, he simply smiles. Afterward, the two return to land. Once they arrive, Caden immediately begins preparing food. He explains that the seaweed resembles wakame, and that, if combined with the eel they obtained earlier, it should make an excellent dish. As Platy watches him work, she cannot help suspecting what he intends to do. Surely he is not planning to make an actual meal from those ingredients. Caden confirms that he is indeed preparing a dish. After seasoning it with salt and pepper, the meal is complete. The result is an isekai-style wakame soup made from eel stock. The moment Platy takes a bite, her eyes widen. It is delicious. The belief that the ingredient is useless suddenly feels completely false. The refined flavor is incredible, and the crisp texture of the seaweed creates a wonderful sensation with every bite. Caden feels relieved. Even if the ingredient appears useless at first glance, he is happy that it can still serve a purpose. He explains that removing the slime from the eel would require a huge amount of salt. Rather than dealing with that process now, he decides to dispose of it there and simply return home afterward. Platy remarks that everyone would be astonished if they ever discovered such a flavor. Once again, her admiration for her dear husband rises dramatically. Hearing that praise causes Caden to blush. However, Caden insists that the achievement is not the result of his efforts alone. Many people have supported him along the way. It is because of their neighbors and the ever-growing number of residents that the two of them were able to build their current lifestyle. Everything has become so lively. More and more, Caden realizes the blessing of having people around him who offer their support. There is also something else he has recently come to realize. He needs to make time for just the two of them. After all, they are newlyweds. Those words immediately cause Platy to blush. Caden then suggests that they come back again someday and swim together with nobody else around, just the two of them. Platy smiles warmly and agrees. At that moment, she realizes that she needs to complete her water-breathing medicine as quickly as possible. Caden readily leaves the matter in her capable hands. The scene then shifts to the demon castle. A voice announces that Astra of Deception, one of the 4 heavenly kings serving under the demon lord, has not only been dismissed from her position, but has also been evicted. As a result, a conference is being held to elect an immediate successor to fill the vacant position among the 4 heavenly kings. However, the Demon King suddenly questions who granted permission for Astra's dismissal in the first place. The man standing beside him explains that, as previously reported, Astra committed a major blunder. The Demon King, however, directs his attention toward Revarian of Poverty. He immediately recognizes that this entire situation is part of Revarian's scheme to force Astra into her current predicament. The king questions whether Revarian truly believes that such manipulation has gone unnoticed. He openly labels the man as disloyal. Meanwhile, the irritating individual immediately begs for forgiveness and respectfully addresses him as Demon Lord Zidane. The Demon King coldly orders him to get himself together before his return. At the very least, He expects him to become capable of shouldering responsibilities on his own. Just then, another individual arrives. The newcomer presents the coordinates connected to the transmitted magic. As the information is handed over, the Demon King silently directs his thoughts toward Caden. For now, Caden only needs to wait. After all, even demon lords have moments when they are driven by passion. Caden notices Astra staring at the strange doll and realizes she has been wanting to ask about it for a while. Curious, she wonders what exactly the doll is. He explains that it is meant to protect the crops from birds and other pests while they are away. He proudly reveals that its name is Kakatsu. Betty admits that, because it is holding a sword, she originally assumed it was some kind of tool for swordsmanship practice. Caden quickly clarifies that the sword serves no real purpose and is merely decorative. As if that is not enough, he casually adds that the scarecrow can also dance, making the sword even more unnecessary. On top of that, it jumps around to scare away birds. The goblins are immediately fascinated by the idea. Before long, they begin jumping alongside the scarecrow. What starts as simple amusement soon turns into an entire dance team, with Kakatsu standing proudly at the center of it all. To everyone's surprise, Caden even gives the dance group a name, HTKI. The others can hardly believe that he somehow found the time to come up with a name for that as well. With a satisfied smile, Caden tells them to look around. In his eyes, everyone is having a wonderful time. However, at that exact moment, disaster strikes. While enthusiastically jumping, the scarecrow suddenly snaps one of its legs. The atmosphere instantly changes. Everyone is overwhelmed with concern, and even Caden is on the verge of tears. The truth is simple. He built the scarecrow using leftover scraps and spare materials. Because of that, it lacks both strength and durability. Filled with guilt, he apologizes to his little scarecrow. Bella, meanwhile, cannot understand why everyone is acting as though the situation is hopeless. She points out that they can simply repair it. The others immediately agree. They remind each other that they possess abilities capable of fixing such problems. Surely they can bring back their dear friend. Hearing those words, Caden wipes away his tears. His confidence quickly returns as he proudly declares that, with his supreme craftsmanship, repairing it will be no problem at all. True to his word, he immediately fixes their beloved scarecrow. The moment Kakatsu is restored, everyone rejoices. Platy then casually wonders whether it would stop breaking altogether if it were made from mana metal instead. Caden pauses to think about the suggestion. The more he considers it, the more convinced he becomes that she is absolutely right. Platy, however, suddenly feels as though she has just said something completely ridiculous. Meanwhile, Caden becomes incredibly excited. Rather than focusing on the mana metal itself, he enthusiastically concludes that it would be even better if the scarecrow were made of wood. As Platy watches his reaction, she can only stare in confusion. No matter how much she thinks about it, she truly cannot understand what kind of things this guy actually likes. Her name is Momoko. Until recently, she is just a normal high school student. Then she is suddenly transported to another world, and now she is fighting monsters. One by one, she gets rid of all of them. She shouts the names of her attacks as though she is a character from an anime. The Goddess Sickle Skill +2 is the power she gains when she is transported to this world. Now she uses that power to fight alongside the humans who are at war with the demons. Getting used to life in this world is extremely difficult. All the modern conveniences she once takes for granted are gone. Food is cooked over open fires, bread is usually stale and hard, and the beds are sometimes infested with fleas. The clothing is made from rough fabrics that leave her skin constantly itching. As a result, some of the people summoned from another world do not survive for very long. She learns a lesson very quickly. If a person is weak, they die. When she is first summoned here, there are 9 others as well, making a total of 10 people. She wonders whether that particular boy is still alive. She recalls that he is judged as having no skills at all. In this harsh world, those without skills die. She, however, is not like him. Her skill is considered exceptionally valuable. It is the reason the king takes care of all her needs. Possessing a skill bestowed by a god is regarded as a rare privilege. The king constantly reminds them of that fact. Now, in this world, she fights with her skill, and she continues to fight without stopping. Yet the enemy never ceases to come. The Demon King's army appears to consist of an endless number of soldiers. For every one they defeat, 2 more seem to take its place. There is no end in sight. So this is what life on the front line is like. Even so, she has already made up her mind. She will protect this world. At that moment, she notices a gigantic dragon appearing on the battlefield. It is one of the two great disasters of this world. Even a mere sighting of it can mean death. To ordinary monsters, that dragon is an absolute monster itself. Everyone wonders why such a terrifying creature has arrived on the battlefield. Even with her special hero skill, the goddess sickle skill +2, she would not come close to scratching the dragon's scales. With a single breath, the dragon could wipe them all out. They have no chance of standing against such a creature. If they remain here, they will simply be destroyed. Everyone begins wondering whether the dragon has come here for the sole purpose of killing them all. The dragon addresses them, calling them insignificant worms. She declares that she is not here to slaughter them, but to deliver a message to all the lesser races. Her words immediately shock everyone present. The humans and demons alike become alarmed. The dragon is actually speaking. The dragon proudly introduces herself as the Great Dragon Ruler, the daughter of the Grazer Dragon. Her name is Grinsel Dragonvale. From this day onward, she explains that she is merely carrying out an errand for her lord. She has come only to return a certain rude individual. At once, everyone realizes who she is referring to. Isn't that the person the commander had ordered them to capture? The Dragon Lady states that she would have already finished them all and been done with the matter. However, they should be grateful to her lord for not allowing such a thing to happen. She commands the lesser races to listen carefully and remember her words well. She makes it clear that she does not care whether they are demons or humans. If anyone dares to trouble her lord in any way, she will obliterate the city of Kazma and every other city she desires with a single breath. For those who believe she is bluffing, she decides to demonstrate a fraction of her power. The display leaves both humans and demons speechless. Everyone can only think about the overwhelming and unimaginable amount of power before them. The dragon then declares that they must know the name of her lord. Her lord is the greatest saint, Caden. She orders them to engrave that name into their hearts. Anyone who becomes Caden's enemy becomes her enemy as well. And should there be a second offense, she promises that she will show absolutely no mercy. The battlefield immediately falls into confusion. Everyone begins wondering who this Caden is. A being greater than that dragon actually exists? Do they truly have someone like that? None of them have ever heard the name before. Meanwhile, on the other side, Caden is peacefully enjoying his meal. He thinks that the food tastes good. Just like yesterday, he plans to do his best while working in the fields. At that very moment, someone suddenly calls out to him. The stranger asks whether he is, by any chance, the great Saint Caden. Caden confirms that he is. Afterward, he curiously questions the man's identity and politely asks who he might be. The man introduces himself as the Demon Lord Zidane. The introduction leaves Caden slightly confused. Even so, he simply greets the Demon Lord with a casual hello. Astra stands quietly while Bella and Betty can barely contain their excitement. Both of them eagerly tell Caden that their commander has finally done it. Commander Astra has successfully completed her very first hunt. After putting forth all her effort, she has managed to secure plenty of meat for everyone, ensuring that they will have a proper meal for dinner. However, Astra's expression immediately changes when she notices another figure standing beside Caden. Her eyes widen in surprise as she realizes that Lord Zidane is there as well. Zidane gazes at her and admits that he had no idea she was staying in this place. Astra appears hesitant and uncomfortable before finally asking why he has come all the way here. Zidane explains that she disappeared without informing anyone and abandoned her forces without a single word. Astra does not deny it and openly acknowledges that she left. However, Zidane presses further, asking her to explain her reasons. He reminds her that she is his finest officer and one of the few people in whom he places absolute trust. His words cause Astra to become even more reluctant. Meanwhile, both Bella and Betty encourage her to tell him everything. After a moment of silence, Astra finally reveals what has been weighing on her mind. She admits that she failed the mission assigned to her, the mission to secure the mermaid princess. Not only did she fail, but she was also publicly humiliated by the dragon. In her eyes, a subordinate who cannot fulfill her duties is worthless to her lord. She believes she has brought nothing but disgrace upon Zidane's name. Because of that, she has decided that she will no longer burden him. She intends to resign from her position and leave his side forever. Zidane immediately dismisses the idea. To him, her words are complete nonsense. He makes it clear that she is not going anywhere. He firmly states that he needs her and expects her to remain by his side at all times. Those heartfelt words cause a faint blush to appear across Astra's face. At the same time, Dragon watches the exchange with visible annoyance and remarks that Astra deserves a break because the entire situation is becoming increasingly irritating to witness. Eventually, everyone settles down and takes their seats. It is decided that they should begin their discussion properly. Zidane introduces himself as the Demon Lord, the supreme ruler of the entire demon nation. Caden responds by saying that he already understands that much. Nevertheless, he cannot help stumbling over his words slightly. After all, this is the first time in his life that he has ever spoken face-to-face with a real demon lord. Zidane calmly explains the responsibilities that come with his title. As a demon lord, it is his duty to lead the demon nation in its endless conflict against the human kingdoms. Every demon lord inherits that obligation. From the day of their birth until the day of their death, they are expected to continue the war against humanity without rest. As Caden listens, he cannot help reflecting on how harsh such a life must be. At the very least, when he returns home, he has a family waiting for him. There are people and comforts that give him something to look forward to. Zidane, on the other hand, seems destined to face battle after battle, with nothing awaiting him except the next conflict. Caden understands that such a relentless existence would become exhausting for anyone. Zidane then explains that this is precisely why he is so grateful for Astra's presence. He describes her as his most dependable officer. She is unwaveringly loyal, exceptionally capable, and utterly indispensable to him. Because of that, he cannot imagine a future in which she is no longer standing at his side. Hearing such praise directed toward her causes Astra to lower her head modestly. She insists that she is undeserving of such generous compliments. Caden then raises a reasonable question. Since Zidane is the Demon Lord himself, shouldn't he possess the authority to pardon Astra, or simply restore her position? After all, he was not the one responsible for exiling her in the first place. Zidane admits that he wishes matters were that simple. He explains that Astra's case was handled through a military tribunal. Following her failure, the tribunal sentenced her to exile. During that period, Zidane was away on the front lines, personally leading the nation's military campaigns. As a result, he was unable to attend the proceedings or defend her. The entire matter was conducted without either his knowledge or his approval. Furthermore, several influential nobles stand to benefit from Astra's removal. With her gone, they can advance their own positions and increase their influence within the demon nation. The current political situation is also far from stable. Many nobles and officials have chosen to place the blame for recent events squarely on Astra's shoulders. They accuse her of provoking the terrifying dragon that appeared on the battlefield and threatened to annihilate everyone present. The aftermath of that incident has thrown the demon nation into complete turmoil. Fear and uncertainty have spread throughout the realm, and countless political disputes have emerged as a result. Because of these ongoing crises, Zidane has been unable to return home and personally settle the unrest. When he finally made it back to the castle, Astra had already vanished. Determined not to lose her, Zidane immediately began searching for her whereabouts. That search eventually led him to this place. As he speaks, Zidane reaches out and gently takes Astra's hand into his own. With complete sincerity, he tells her how grateful he is to see her again. He asks her never to disappear like that another time. When he first learned of her exile, he genuinely believed that he had lost her forever. For a brief moment, the atmosphere grows quiet. Astra remains speechless as she looks at the hand holding hers. The weight of Zidane's words settles heavily upon her heart. She had convinced herself that she was nothing more than a failure who had brought disgrace upon her lord. Yet standing before her now is the very person she had been trying to leave behind, refusing to let her go and making it clear just how important she truly is to him. Meanwhile, Caden, Bella, Betty, and the others watch the scene unfold in silence, fully aware that the bond between Zidane and Astra runs far deeper than that of a mere ruler and subordinate. Platy watches the interaction between Astra and Zidane for a while before finally voicing what everyone else is already thinking. From her perspective, the situation is completely obvious. The feelings between the two of them are practically written across their faces, and it seems clear that Astra has long harbored affection for the Demon Lord. The moment those words leave Platy's mouth, Astra immediately denies them. She insists that there is nothing like that between them. According to her, she and Zidane have simply known each other since childhood. They grew up together and have remained close friends ever since. There is nothing more to it than that. Unfortunately for Astra, the dragon has absolutely no intention of accepting that explanation. The dragon immediately calls her a liar. In her opinion, Astra is refusing to acknowledge reality. More importantly, She argues that Astra should be considering Zidane's position rather than her own feelings. As the Demon Lord, he bears the responsibility of governing the entire demon nation. Every decision he makes affects countless citizens. Because of that, he cannot afford to openly favor a single subordinate who has already been branded as incompetent by the authorities. Before anyone can properly respond, however, the dragon suddenly loses her patience. Her voice rises as she loudly declares that everyone should simply shut up. From her perspective, the matter is incredibly simple. Zidane is the Demon Lord. He stands at the very top of the demon nation. If he truly wants something, then he possesses the authority to make it happen. Therefore, instead of standing around talking endlessly, he should simply gather his courage and say whatever it is that he clearly wants to say. The dragon's blunt and vulgar outburst leaves everyone momentarily speechless. Zidane can only remark that such crude and adult language sounds rather inappropriate coming from someone who appears to be a child. Astra immediately corrects him. She informs Zidane that the dragon is not a child at all. In fact, she is the daughter of the mighty Grazer Dragon, one of the world's 2 great calamities. Her true identity is Grinzel Dragon, a being whose very existence is feared across the world. At that revelation, understanding finally dawns on Zidane. The dragon then proudly explains that she originally intended to incinerate Astra the moment they met. However, instead of doing so, she went through considerable effort to bring Astra safely back to him. Therefore, Zidane should consider himself fortunate that Master Caden decided to spare his friend. Hearing that statement causes Caden to direct a rather meaningful look toward the dragon. He calmly remarks that the two of them are definitely going to have a conversation about that particular subject later. The dragon, however, appears entirely unconcerned. She casually brushes aside his warning, arguing that she accomplished exactly what he wanted in the end. Since the outcome was satisfactory, she sees no reason to dwell on the details. Zidane takes a moment to absorb everything he has learned. As he looks around the gathering, he cannot help but reflect upon how extraordinary the situation truly is. This place is supposedly the home of the great Saint Caden, yet Astra is currently surrounded by individuals who could hardly be described as ordinary. Between an ancient dragon connected to one of the world's greatest calamities and the countless strange circumstances surrounding Caden himself, the entire group is unlike anything he expected. To say that Astra has found herself in the company of unusual people would be a tremendous understatement. Nevertheless, Zidane acknowledges that Astra owes these people a great debt. They protected her, sheltered her, and ultimately saved her life. For that, he is genuinely grateful. At the same time, however, there is one matter that cannot be ignored. No matter how grateful he may be, he must bring Astra home. Having reached that conclusion, Zidane formally steps forward. With the dignity expected of a ruler, he declares that he, Zidane, Demon Lord of the Demon Nation, hereby challenges the great Saint Caden to a duel. He explains that he does not take his title lightly. The position of Demon Lord carries both responsibility and pride. Therefore, if Astra's future is at stake, he intends to demonstrate his resolve as a warrior. The declaration immediately catches Caden off guard. Caden quickly points out that there is really no need for such an extreme course of action. Before the discussion can continue, Platy interjects once more. In her opinion, the outcome would not change regardless. She proudly begins listing the absurd advantages on Caden's side. After all, her beloved master is recognized as the master of Grinzel, one of the world's 2 calamities. Furthermore, there is also the possibility that he commands the second calamity as well. She then brings up another legendary figure, the Undead King. Platy continues enthusiastically, explaining that if the rumors are true, then Caden may possess connections to both of the world's greatest disasters. Under those circumstances, she confidently declares that Zidane and the Demon Nation would stand absolutely no chance. Her endless stream of praise causes Zidane to turn toward Astra. He quietly asks whether any of that is actually true. Astra responds with complete honesty. She confirms that it is. The answer leaves Zidane staring silently at Caden for a moment. The dragon explains that, after listening to the Demon Lord's heartfelt confession, she finally understands where Astra truly belongs. In her opinion, Astra's rightful place is beside Zidane. Furthermore, she believes that Astra can fully realize her potential and remain true to herself only while standing at his side. With that conclusion, the dragon encourages Astra to respond honestly. Zidane has already revealed his true feelings without hesitation, so Astra should stop hiding hers as well and express what is in her heart. The atmosphere instantly becomes tense and emotional. Everyone present blushes at the obvious meaning behind the dragon's words. After gathering her courage, Astra finally reveals her answer. She swears that for the rest of her life, she will remain by Zidane's side. Whether on the battlefield or even beyond death itself, she promises never to abandon him. Upon hearing those words, Zidane is overwhelmed with relief and happiness. He tells Astra to return home with him and assures her that he never wants to lose her again. The entire gathering erupts with excitement. At long last, the injustice committed by the four heavenly kings appears to have been corrected. What seemed like an impossible situation only moments ago has suddenly transformed into a heartfelt reunion. However, before the celebration can continue, Platy abruptly interrupts everyone. Her sudden intervention leaves the crowd confused. They wonder what could possibly be wrong now. Platy explains that Zidane's outlook is far too optimistic. While the emotional reunion is touching, he is overlooking a serious political problem. Specifically, the other demon nobles are likely expecting him to marry her. This statement immediately confuses Zidane. He asks who exactly she is supposed to be. Platy calmly introduces herself as the first princess of the Mermaid Kingdom. She then reveals a shocking piece of information. The demon nobility had previously sent a formal petition to her father, requesting a political marriage alliance between herself and the demon lord. The revelation leaves Zidane completely stunned. He cannot understand how such an arrangement could exist without his knowledge. He insists that nobody ever informed him about any marriage negotiations. Realizing how suspicious the situation must appear, Zidane quickly turns his attention back to Astra. He makes it clear that she should not misunderstand the situation because he genuinely had no knowledge of any such proposal. Meanwhile, Kaden begins thinking through the political implications. From a strategic perspective, the arrangement actually makes perfect sense. An alliance between the Demon Nation and the Mermaid Kingdom would significantly strengthen both sides, especially in their ongoing struggle against humanity. Combining the military power of the demons with the resources of the mermaids would create an incredibly powerful coalition. Platy agrees with his assessment. She explains that the issue has always been about royal politics rather than personal feelings. Naturally, a marriage between herself and the Demon Lord is impossible because she is already married to Kaden. Nevertheless, the proposal itself reveals something important. According to Platy, the entire situation appears to be the work of someone attempting to undermine Zidane's authority. She points out that Astra's removal from the position of Four Heavenly King would dramatically alter the balance of power within the Demon Nation. After all, Astra is Zidane's most trusted subordinate and closest ally. Because of that, Platy asks Zidane to think carefully. Among the remaining Heavenly Kings and influential demon nobles, who would benefit the most from Astra's dismissal? The answer immediately becomes obvious to him. There is only one person who stands to gain the most, that incredibly irritating individual. Platy confirms his suspicion. In fact, she believes this has been part of that person's strategy from the very beginning. When she married Kaden, that man arranged for Astra to be sent to retrieve her. Then, once Astra returned unsuccessfully, he seized the opportunity to portray her mission as a failure. By discrediting Astra, he could remove her from the competition and elevate himself to the position of second in command within the Demon Nation. The realization fills Zidane with fury. Even if he were to bring Astra back to the Demon Nation immediately, the damage has already been done. The nobles would constantly remind everyone of her supposed failure. Public opinion would turn against both Astra and himself. Platy agrees with his concerns. At best, Zidane would lose a significant number of loyal supporters in the beginning. At worst, the demon nobles could begin questioning his legitimacy as ruler. They might even demand that he abdicate the throne entirely. Such a development would conveniently clear the path for that troublesome rival to seize power. Kaden then asks whether there is any possible solution. Platy explains that the marriage proposal was never solely about creating an alliance between kingdoms. The nobles were also concerned about the future stability of the nation. They wanted the royal family to produce heirs who could continue the bloodline and secure the kingdom's future. If Zidane rejects the mermaid princess without providing an alternative, many people will interpret his decision as a disregard for the future of the nation itself. Although Zidane clearly dislikes the political pressure surrounding the issue, personal feelings alone cannot make the problem disappear. Fortunately, Platy reveals that there is actually a surprisingly simple solution. According to her, there is a way to simultaneously protect Astra, preserve Zidane's authority, secure the future of the Demon Nation, and completely ruin their enemies' plans. With everyone's attention focused on her, Platy turns towards Zidane and Astra. Instead of returning to the Demon Nation as lord and subordinate, she suggests that they return as husband and wife, In other words, they should simply get married. The proposal immediately leaves both Zidane and Astra frozen in place. Their faces turn bright red as the full meaning of her words sinks in. While everyone else begins realizing how perfectly the plan solves every political problem at once, the two individuals at the center of the discussion can only stand there in stunned embarrassment, struggling to process the sudden suggestion of marriage. The moment Platy proposes marriage as the solution, even the subordinates overseeing the matter become visibly excited. To them, the idea seems perfect. Not only would it solve the political crisis surrounding Astra's dismissal, but it would also completely destroy the schemes of the individual plotting against both Astra and Zidane. Despite the enthusiasm around him, Zidane is left completely overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events. The proposal feels as though it has appeared out of nowhere. Marriage is a serious commitment, and the thought of making such a decision on the spot leaves him struggling to keep up with the conversation. However, Platy immediately notices his hesitation and questions whether he has any objections to the plan. When Zidane considers the matter carefully, he realizes that he does not actually have any problem with the idea itself. The shock comes only from how unexpectedly it has been presented. Seeing this, Platy confidently declares that there is no issue at all. After all, if Astra becomes the Demon Queen, then the outcome would be disastrous for the person who has been working behind the scenes to destroy her reputation. She proceeds to explain the political logic behind it. Anyone within the Demon Nation who seeks influence as close as possible to the Demon King naturally wants a family connection to the throne. Such individuals would likely dream of placing their own daughter or sister in the position of the king's wife. By doing so, they could gain immense political influence and secure their standing within the nation. However, if Zidane and Astra marry each other, every one of those ambitions immediately falls apart. The position of queen would already be occupied. The conspirators' carefully laid plans would collapse before they could ever come to fruition. Platy feels thoroughly satisfied with this conclusion. As far as she is concerned, the solution is elegant, practical, and completely effective. With a triumphant expression, she announces that the matter is essentially settled and that the case can now be considered closed. Yet despite everyone else's enthusiasm, Astra still appears somewhat uncertain. Although she understands the reasoning behind the proposal, she cannot help but wonder about the practical details. Even if they agree to marry, she questions what they are actually supposed to do next. Platy immediately responds that it is an excellent question. According to her, a marriage requires one essential element above all else. The couple must exchange marriage vows before God. Unfortunately, her explanation only succeeds in confusing everyone present. Seeing the bewildered expressions around her, Platy patiently elaborates. To exchange vows before God means standing before a divine presence and pledging their love and devotion to one another. Once such vows are made sincerely, not even fate itself should be capable of standing in the way of their union. As Caden listens to the explanation, he cannot help comparing it to the customs of his previous world. In his old world, marriage was far more bureaucratic. Couples would simply complete official registration forms, submit them to the appropriate government office, and become legally married through administrative procedures. Because of that background, he finds himself curious about how marriage vows are actually conducted in this world. Platy is delighted by the question. Rather than merely explaining the process, she decides there is no reason to wait. In her opinion, they should begin immediately. Just as she reaches that conclusion, an unexpected figure enters the scene. The lifeless king is present. The moment Zidane lays eyes on him, he becomes visibly startled. The sight before him is so unbelievable that he can scarcely process it. At once, he realizes that the stories he has heard must have been true all along. Rumors have circulated, claiming that Caden shelters two of the world's greatest disasters under his roof. Until now, Zidane had treated those stories as exaggerations. However, now that he is seeing everything with his own eyes, he can no longer deny the truth. The lifeless king truly exists, which means the other unbelievable rumor must also be true. That small young lady is genuinely a dragon. The confirmation leaves him deeply shaken. Meanwhile, Caden turns toward Platy and asks why she summoned Sensei in the first place. Platy explains her reasoning without hesitation. She intends to have Sensei serve as the witness for the marriage ceremony. Although he now exists as an undead being, he was once a highly respected pastor who presided over a large church during his lifetime. Because of his extensive experience with religious ceremonies, she believes he is the perfect person to oversee the exchange of vows. In her mind, there could be no better witness. She wants the gods themselves to observe Zidane and Astra as they pledge their love and devotion to one another. After explaining her plan, she asks Sensei for his opinion. Unfortunately, his response introduces an entirely new complication. He points out that the couple belongs to the demon race. While he may currently exist in an undead form, he originally served humanity during his lifetime. The statement immediately causes Platy's confidence to crumble. She realizes that she has overlooked something incredibly important. Different races worship different gods. The human race venerates the god of heaven. The mermaid race worships Poseidon. Meanwhile, the demon race places its faith in Hades, the god of the underworld. Each race follows its own traditions, beliefs, and religious customs. The realization strikes Platy like a bolt of lightning. She suddenly understands that she may have made a significant mistake. As Caden observes the discussion, he once again compares it to the religious divisions that existed in his former world. To him, the situation feels somewhat similar to bringing someone into the wrong church for a wedding ceremony. Meanwhile, Platy becomes increasingly worried about the situation she has created. However, Sensei remains calm. Having lived for over 1,000 years, he has accumulated an enormous amount of knowledge throughout his existence. Although the doctrines and teachings of different faiths may vary, he believes he can still find a solution. He confidently states that he will study the appropriate etiquette and prayer rituals necessary for the ceremony. With someone as experienced as Sensei handling the matter, there is no reason to panic. Relieved by his willingness to help, Platy turns back toward Astra. She explains how the situation currently stands and asks whether everyone is comfortable proceeding under those circumstances. The response is immediate. Nobody raises any objection. Instead, they express their gratitude toward her for going through so much effort on their behalf. Their appreciation reassures Platy considerably. With the final concerns addressed, Sensei decides there is no longer any reason to delay. He declares that they should move forward and attempt the ceremony. Offering his blessing, he expresses his hope that good fortune will be bestowed upon the couple and that their union will ultimately bear fruit. As the ritual continues, Sensei offers a solemn prayer, declaring that even if they are taken to the deepest depths of the earth, they should receive the blessing of the Mother Goddess. Through that blessing, this place will become a sanctuary, purified according to divine will. The moment those words are spoken, he activates his magic, and a magnificent magic circle instantly appears beneath them. Caden stares at the phenomenon in complete confusion, unable to understand what kind of magic he is witnessing. Platy quickly realizes that this must be one of Sensei's sacred prayers. At the same time, she senses an incredibly heavy and overwhelming presence descending upon the surface of the earth. Moments later, a colossal divine figure materializes before everyone. Both Astra and Zidane are stunned beyond belief. They immediately recognize the being standing before them as Hades, the god of the underworld himself. Even Sensei appears surprised by the result. He casually admits that he may have gone a little too far and accidentally summoned the actual god. His remark leaves Platy utterly speechless, as she cannot comprehend what kind of going too far could possibly result in the appearance of a deity. Sensei explains that his original intention was simply to offer a prayer and create a sacred holy ground suitable for conducting the wedding ceremony. However, the situation has clearly escalated beyond anything he anticipated. Platy can only conclude that since the god has already arrived, there is no point worrying about it anymore. The more pressing question is what they are supposed to do now. Sensei calmly responds that there is nothing special they need to do. The god of the underworld then speaks, noting that someone has successfully materialized him in this location. Such an event has not occurred for a very long time, making him curious about the purpose behind the summoning. Before anyone else can respond, Zidane steps forward respectfully. He explains that although the conflict between the demon race and humanity continues to fluctuate between tension and stability, it is not a matter that should concern a god directly. The divine being then asks a simpler question. He wishes to know who is kneeling before him and requests an introduction. Zidane immediately offers a respectful apology for disturbing the deity. He introduces himself as the Demon King and explains that he is currently seeking the hand of a woman in marriage. In preparation for this occasion, a wedding ceremony has been conducted, and they merely wish to receive a divine blessing for their union. Unfortunately, through an unexpected turn of events, they ended up summoning the god himself. Zidane sincerely apologizes for causing such a disturbance and humbly asks that their apology be accepted. Upon hearing the explanation, the god remarks that since the ritual was performed by the undead king, it is only natural that the prayer would eventually reach him directly. The deity then agrees to grant his blessing, though not without a condition. He declares that if his blessing is to be bestowed upon the marriage, the bride must remain the Demon King's one and only wife. He demands a solemn vow that the Demon King will cherish and love this woman for the remainder of his life. Without even a moment of hesitation, Zidane passionately accepts the condition. He declares that such devotion is all he has ever desired. As the Demon King, the woman he intends to spend the rest of his life with is none other than Astra. Satisfied by the answer, the god of the underworld praises the declaration. He formally acknowledges Zidane as the Demon King and Astra as the future Demon Queen. With those words, he grants his divine blessing upon their union. Immediately afterward, the god disappears from sight. Watching everything unfold, Caden cannot help thinking that gods are surprisingly reasonable and benevolent beings. Meanwhile, the dragon simply concludes that the god was an exceptionally loud individual. Sensei reflects on the incident and decides that he will need to exercise greater caution whenever performing prayer ceremonies in the future. Pletty, however, points out the extraordinary significance of what has just happened. Receiving a blessing directly from a god provides the couple with the highest level of divine protection imaginable. According to the blessing, their marriage is protected by sacred authority. It grants fertility, ensures safe childbirth, and establishes a powerful divine safeguard around their relationship. Anyone foolish enough to attempt to forcibly separate them or sabotage their union will likely suffer divine punishment. In Pletty's eyes, this has become the ultimate proof of love that Zidane could ever offer Astra. Caden quietly realizes that this blessing serves as undeniable evidence that their marriage is, for all practical purposes, already officially recognized. Afterward, Zidane turns toward Caden, overwhelmed with gratitude. He admits that he can scarcely find the words to express his thanks. The dream of marrying Astra was something he had long ago resigned himself to abandoning. Yet, thanks to Caden's involvement, that impossible dream has finally become reality. Astra also expresses her heartfelt gratitude. She promises that neither of them will ever forget the kindness shown to them, and that they will remember it for the rest of their lives. Caden feels slightly embarrassed by the praise. From his perspective, he has not really done anything significant. Nevertheless, seeing the happiness of the couple genuinely pleases him. At that point, Zidane glances toward Pletty before shifting his attention back to Astra. Believing everything has finally been settled, he suggests that it is time for them to return home. Once they arrive in the Demon Nation, Astra can be formally introduced to the entire country as its new Demon Queen. Unexpectedly, Astra refuses. Her answer instantly leaves everyone bewildered. Addressing Zidane respectfully as the Demon King, Astra reveals that she would like to remain where she is for a little while longer. The declaration catches everyone completely off guard, and confusion quickly spreads among the gathered group as they struggle to understand the reason behind her sudden decision. The dragon immediately begins shouting at Astra, insisting that she should simply return home. In the dragon's eyes, Astra and Zidane are already married, so there is no reason for them to remain apart. The dragon cannot understand why they would choose to stay here instead of returning to their own country together. Before the situation escalates further, Caden steps in and calms the dragon down. He then turns his attention toward Astra and asks a sincere question. He wants to know the real reason she refuses to leave. Since everyone is discussing her future, he believes they should first hear her own thoughts and understand why she still wishes to remain here. Astra finally explains herself. She says that she has changed significantly since coming here. Under the guidance of the saint and everyone around her, she has learned many things and has grown as a person. Because of those experiences, she wishes to continue improving herself. She wants to remain as the Dawn's wife and continue walking the path she has chosen for herself. Hearing this, the Dawn acknowledges her determination. He understands that Astra now has reasons of her own and is no longer simply acting on impulse. Accepting her decision, he turns toward Caden and apologetically asks for a favor. He requests that Caden continue looking after Astra for a little while longer. Caden immediately responds that he does not mind helping. However, he honestly admits that he is not even sure how he can be of much assistance. He feels somewhat guilty as well, especially because the newly married couple will once again be separated from one another. Afterward, Caden directs his attention toward Zidane and asks whether he would also like to remain here for some time. He then questions whether that would truly be acceptable. After all, Zidane is the Demon King. Caden wonders if his absence would not create problems for the people of the Demon Nation. Zidane calmly explains that it should not be a problem, at least for a short period. He points out that the sudden appearance of the dragon on the battlefield has left both opposing factions deeply shaken. Neither side fully understands what happened, and both are currently gathering information. Until they obtain a clearer picture of the situation, neither faction is likely to mobilize its troops. This explanation reassures Kaden considerably. Zidane then adds that his stay is only possible if Kaden does not mind having him around. Kaden immediately assures him that he is more than welcome. In fact, he tells them to make themselves at home. As the thought crosses his mind, he even begins wondering whether he should build a house for them to stay in. However, before that idea can go any further, the dragon suddenly interrupts once more. The dragon asks everyone to wait and questions whether they are truly comfortable with this arrangement. If the dragon has understood everything correctly, then there is currently nobody in their respective camps investigating the conspiracy that has caused all this trouble. If they simply leave things as they are while both leaders remain here, then the centers of their organizations will effectively be left exposed. Under such circumstances, the opposing side might easily assume that they are secretly plotting something suspicious. Zidane remains completely unconcerned by the dragon's worries. He confidently tells the dragon not to worry because that possibility has already been taken into consideration. Every necessary precaution has been accounted for beforehand. Hearing such a composed answer, Kaden cannot help but think that this level of preparation is exactly what one would expect from the Demon King. Unfortunately, the dragon refuses to let the matter rest. The dragon loudly points out another issue. To begin with, Zidane himself is standing here in person. He does not even possess a ship, so the dragon cannot understand how he managed to arrive here in the first place. More importantly, how does he plan to return? Zidane casually explains that he uses teleportation magic. If a teleportation point has been established beforehand, he can instantly travel between locations without difficulty. This revelation leaves Kaden deeply impressed. He cannot help thinking that teleportation is an incredibly convenient ability. Soon afterward, Zidane turns toward one of Astra's subordinates, Bella. He recalls that she is among the very few members of the demon race capable of freely using teleportation magic. Before coming here, she had apparently left him a note containing the exact coordinates of this location. At that moment, Betty rushes over and enthusiastically throws her arms around Bella. She praises Bella and excitedly tells her how amazing she is. Bella modestly explains her reasoning. The thought of Astra and Zidane being separated because of a suspicious conspiracy had frustrated her greatly. Because she could not tolerate such an outcome, she decided to act on her own and make the necessary arrangements. Zidane gratefully acknowledges her efforts and remarks that everything has worked out thanks to her actions. He openly credits Bella for making their reunion possible. Meanwhile, the dragon can only watch the scene unfold with mounting frustration. As far as the dragon is concerned, Bella is entirely responsible for creating this troublesome situation. While everyone else expresses gratitude and admiration toward her, the dragon silently vows that Bella will never be forgiven for it. Platy suddenly raises another concern and decides to speak up. She explains that she does not wish to ruin the mood, but there is something that has been bothering her. Earlier, Zidane mentioned that several members of the demon race are capable of using teleportation magic. Because of that, she wonders whether other demons might eventually follow him and arrive at this location as well. Zidane calmly reassures her that there is no need to worry. He explains that the coordinates required to access this place have been heavily encrypted. Unless the individual responsible for creating that encryption personally reveals the information, discovering the location is practically impossible. Furthermore, the entire area has been hidden from detection through a powerful concealment barrier. He continues by explaining that the demon race commonly utilizes teleportation and clairvoyance magic in the current era. Both forms of magic allow users to locate and identify distant places. However, there are certain advanced forms of interference magic capable of completely nullifying such attempts. This region is protected by exactly that kind of power. When Zidane initially attempted to teleport here, every effort ended in failure. The concealment surrounding the area prevented him from locating it. The only reason he managed to arrive at all was because Bella provided him with the necessary coordinates beforehand. Without her assistance, reaching this place would have been impossible. Because of those precautions, nobody else can easily come here. And now that he himself is present, there is even less reason to fear anyone discovering the location. Upon hearing this explanation, Kaden begins wondering who could possibly have erected such an incredibly convenient barrier. Sensei immediately answers the question. According to him, only a dragon would be capable of performing magic of this magnitude. Everyone's attention immediately shifts toward the dragon. The dragon realizes that there is little point in concealing the truth any longer. With a reluctant expression, she admits responsibility. She explains that after tossing that troublesome demon onto the battlefield and heading home, she decided to place a powerful barrier around the entire area. Her intention had been to keep unwanted visitors away. Unfortunately, despite all her efforts, that irritating demon still managed to arrive here through means she had not anticipated. Kaden looks at the dragon and asks whether she had truly been thinking about him that much. The dragon instantly explodes with embarrassment and loudly declares that of course she had. After all, she wants to keep Master Mules entirely to herself. Yet people continue appearing one after another and settling around him. As more individuals gather, even her share of the food becomes smaller. The explanation causes everyone to realize that her actions were never motivated by hatred. The group remarks that she had not been trying to drive them away because she disliked them at all. Kaden smiles warmly before gently patting the dragon on the head. He sincerely thanks her for always looking after him. With the atmosphere becoming peaceful once more, Kaden decides that the occasion deserves a proper celebration. He announces that they will hold a party that evening in honor of Astra and the Demon King's marriage. At the same time, they will also celebrate the dragon's efforts and dedication.